I sat alone beside the kitchen doors at my own son's wedding, wearing the work shirt someone had put in my suitcase instead of my suit. Then the spotlight hit my face. My son raised his glass and laughed in front of more than 200 guests. Look at him. He spent his life inspecting old bridges. He's nothing but a parasite. The ballroom exploded with laughter. I stood to leave, but a stranger in an expensive suit gripped my shoulder. Stay. In 10 minutes, they'll beg for your forgiveness. This story doesn't start gently. Before we begin, I need to ask you something. Drop a comment. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Yes or no? Your voice here matters more than you realize. Quick note, some details are fictionalized to protect privacy and emphasize the lesson, but the core message is what I hope stays with you. I arrived at my son's wedding wearing the wrong clothes, and I knew exactly who had made sure of it. The Grand Harrington Hotel ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and white roses. 200 guests in black tie and designer gowns. I stood at the entrance at 6:30 wearing a flannel shirt I'd packed for the drive home. The new charcoal suit I'd folded into my suitcase that morning had vanished. In its place, my oldest work shirt, the one with the frayed collar. 69 years old, retired Federal Highway Administration structural safety engineer, and I looked like I'd wandered in from a construction site. A young woman with a clipboard appeared at my elbow. Hotel usher, maybe 25, hair pulled back severely. Name, Luther Garrison. Her finger traced down the list. Garrison, table 18. She pointed past the dance floor, past the prime tables, where my son's business partner sat. Table 18 was 3 feet from the kitchen doors. I could hear dishes clattering, smell industrial detergent. 5 empty chairs. No place settings. No meal ticket. I walked the length of that ballroom, feeling 200 pairs of eyes track my flannel. Someone whispered. Someone laughed. I kept my shoulders straight, the way I'd walked across half-finished bridge spans 40 feet above water. I sat down. The chair wobbled. Mrs. Whitfield passed my table, wife of Brent's business partner, late 50s designer, heels diamonds at her throat catching the light. Her eyes swept over me like I was a stain on expensive upholstery. I suppose even the help needs somewhere to sit, she said to her companion, not lowering her voice. They kept walking. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Old model, cracked screen, but the microphone worked perfectly. I'd tested it that morning. I placed it flat on the table, face up, seemingly absent-minded. Just an old man who didn't know better. The phone was recording. I looked toward the head table. My son, Brent, 36, CEO of Garrison Development Group, sat in a $3,000 tuxedo beside his bride, Cosima Valencia, 32, my new daughter-in-law, in white silk and diamonds that made her look like she'd stepped from a fairy tale. Her smile was sharp as broken glass. She caught my eye across the ballroom, raised her champagne flute in a mock toast. She'd swapped my suit. I nodded back. Took one last look around that magnificent room. Everything was set. Dinner service came and went. Waiters swept past table 18 without slowing, trays of filet mignon held high-headed for guests who mattered. My stomach growled. I'd skipped lunch. The kitchen doors swung open and shut, a rhythm like a heartbeat. How many hours had I spent building structures for strangers, to cross safely only to be told I didn't belong at my own son's celebration? At 8:45, the lights dimmed. A spotlight snapped on, illuminating the head table. Brent stood, took the microphone. The ballroom fell silent. He'd changed his diapers, taught him to ride a bike, paid for his college when his mother and I could barely afford it. He looked directly at table 18. Today is a day for high achievers, Brent said, his voice smooth and practiced. People who build things. People who contribute to society. People who matter. He paused. But I see a shameless parasite sitting right over there. My father. The spotlight swung from the stage. Found me. I raised one hand against the glare. This man spent his entire pathetic life measuring rusty bridges for the government. Never built anything. Never created anything. And now he has the audacity to bring his broken body here to scrounge for scraps at my wedding. Laughter rippled through the ballroom. Real laughter, the kind that comes from a crowd enjoying a spectacle. Brent gestured to a waiter. Those who don't contribute don't eat. Take his plate away. The waiter looked confused. There was no plate, but hurried over anyway, making a show of removing my empty place setting. More laughter. Someone applauded. Cosima stood beside Brent, her expression utter disgust. 200 people turned to look at me. My vision blurred at the edges. For 43 years, I'd signed off on bridge inspections, 217 structures, each carrying thousands of lives. My hand never shook, not once, not until tonight. I pushed my chair back. The metal legs scraped against the floor. I couldn't take another second of this humiliation. I had what I came for. Time to leave. A heavy hand landed on my shoulder. Not rough, not threatening, just steady. The kind of weight that says stay. I turned around. A man stood beside me in an impeccable dark suit. Italian cut silk tie, $10,000 tailoring, silver hair at the temples, maybe 64 eyes that had seen things most people spend their lives avoiding. Warren Hewitt. He looked like he belonged at the head table, not back here by the kitchen doors. He leaned down his mouth close to my ear. The entire ballroom was watching the spotlight still on us, but he didn't seem to care. Act like you're with me, he whispered. Just trust me. His hand stayed on my shoulder. They will beg for your forgiveness. I stared at him, didn't recognize his face, but something in his voice, absolute certainty, the kind you only hear from engineers who've run the calculations twice and know the structure will hold. He straightened, turned to face the ballroom, still standing beside table 18. His hand remained on my shoulder with the weight of something I couldn't yet name. Then he started walking toward the stage, and I realized he wasn't asking me to leave. I was asking me to watch. Before I could respond, Warren walked me straight to the stage. His hand stayed on my shoulder, not pulling, not pushing, just guiding. 200 guests sat frozen in their seats, wine glasses halfway to mouths. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The master of ceremonies, a hired professional in black tie standing near the podium, stepped back automatically when Warren approached. Warren took the microphone. Good evening, he said, his voice calm and clear through the sound system. I apologize for the interruption. My name is Warren Hewitt. I am Senior Safety Consultant for the National Infrastructure Group. The ballroom stayed silent. Someone coughed nervously near the front. I didn't come here tonight for the groom, Warren continued, though I congratulate him on his marriage. I came for the chief engineer sitting at table 18. Every head in the room turned toward the back corner where I'd been sitting moments ago, then turned back to the stage where I now stood beside Warren, still in my flannel shirt. 30 years ago, Warren said, I was 24 years old, fresh out of graduate school, working my first job as a junior inspector on a bridge construction project outside Pittsburgh. There was a scaffolding collapse under the span. Steel cables snapped. The platform I was standing on dropped 40 feet. He paused. The silence was absolute. If the hands of the chief safety engineer hadn't dragged me out of that rubble, I wouldn't be standing here today. Those hands belonged to Luther Garrison, the man you just called a parasite, the man whose plate you removed, the man you are laughing at. Warren turned to face Brent directly. You are laughing at a legend of Northeast American bridge engineering. He raised his glass. To Luther Garrison. The ballroom held its breath. Then slowly wine glasses began to lift. First one, then another, then a dozen, then 50. Not everyone. Mrs. Whitfield kept her hands in her lap, her face a mask of confusion. But enough, more than enough. I looked at my son. Brent stood motionless on the stage beside his bride, his face the color of old paper, his mouth opened, closed. He recognized Warren's name. I could see it in his eyes. Warren Hewitt, Senior Safety Consultant, the man who'd been reviewing the Delaware Bridge project specifications for the past 6 months. The man whose approval Brent needed to move forward. The irony was almost too perfect. 30 years ago, I'd pulled a stranger from twisted metal without thinking twice. Tonight, that stranger was pulling me back from an edge I'd been standing on far too long. Warren handed the microphone back to the MC and turned to me. Come with me, he said quietly. We need to talk. Now. He guided me through the crowd toward a side exit. Guests parted automatically. I caught fragments of whispered conversations. Bridge engineer saved his life. The son didn't know, but kept my eyes forward. Brent remained frozen on stage, Cosima's hand on his arm, her knuckles white against the dark fabric of his tuxedo. We stepped through a side door onto a third-floor balcony overlooking the Delaware River. October wind hit my face cold and sharp. The Philadelphia skyline glittered across the water lights, reflecting on the dark surface. The door closed behind us, muffling the ballroom noise to a distant murmur. Warren pulled a tablet from inside his suit jacket. There isn't much time, he said. Your son is in deeper than you know. He swiped through screens, then turned the tablet toward me. This is a power of attorney document filed with your bank 3 weeks ago. Forged signature, your handwriting. But the pressure points are wrong. I had it analyzed. It grants your son full control over your assets, including your $15 million settlement from the Highway Administration pension dispute. I nodded slowly. Warren swiped again. This is a shell company named VH Capital LLC registered in the Cayman Islands. Your daughter-in-law is listed as beneficial owner under her maiden name. There's a pending transfer authorization for $15 million the moment your settlement clears next week. He swiped once more. And this is a reserved room at Cedarwood Care Facility. Involuntary placement. Medical necessity. No outside contact permitted. The intake paperwork is already filled out. Your name is on it. The wind cut across the balcony. I looked at the tablet screen, then at Warren's face. I know, I said. Warren blinked. I know Warren. I've known for 3 weeks. His expression shifted confusion, then something sharper. My bank manager called me 3 weeks ago, I continued. Iris Townsend Northern Trust Branch on Walnut Street. She'd worked with me for 15 years, handled my settlement negotiations. When she saw the power of attorney filing, something felt wrong. The signature looked right, but the supporting documentation was too clean, too perfect. She called me directly. I looked back through the glass door at the ballroom. Brent was still on stage talking urgently with Cosima. I contacted Preston Madden that same day. He's a forensic accountant I helped get started 3 years ago when he was opening his practice. He traced the shell company in 48 hours, found the Cedarwood reservation in 72. Warren stared at me. Tonight. I said I didn't attend this wedding out of affection. I didn't come hoping for reconciliation. I came to let my phone record that speech as the final irrefutable piece of evidence. My son just publicly declared on tape in front of 200 witnesses that I am worthless and don't deserve to eat. That's elder abuse. That's the missing piece. Warren stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. You let them humiliate you, he said slowly. On purpose. Evidence requires context, I said. Financial documents show intent, but that speech shows motive, shows character, shows a pattern of contempt that makes the involuntary commitment believable as their next step. I looked down at the tablet still glowing in his hand. The screen showed engineering blueprints. I recognized immediately the Delaware River Bridge project, my son's company, the biggest contract Brent had ever landed. There's one more thing I haven't told you, I said, about the name on the patent. Warren's eyes widened slightly. The patent, he repeated. The one stamped on those blueprints you're holding, I said. The load-bearing sensor technology, your safety review, flagged as critical to the project's approval. I met his eyes. My son doesn't know whose name is on it. I pulled out my phone and opened the email I'd been carrying for 3 years like a quiet bomb. Patent number US 2099037842, I said, turning the screen toward Warren. Box girder bridge foundation system with integrated load-bearing sensors. Filed 2019. Approved 2022. Department of Transportation licensing agreement finalized last month. $22 million structured payout over 5 years. Warren took the phone. His eyes moved across the screen, reading the patent office letterhead, the technical specifications, the signature at the bottom. My signature. Then he looked up at me, then back at his tablet showing the Delaware Bridge blueprints. His hands went very still. Pull up the foundation specifications, I said quietly. Section 4, subsection B, load distribution matrix. Warren's fingers moved across the tablet screen. The blueprint zoomed in, revealing the technical drawings I'd reviewed 100 times in my mind over the past 3 weeks. Box girder configuration, sensor array placement, stress distribution algorithm. Luther, Warren said, his voice barely above a whisper, this is the exact same design. Patent number 29103842. Your son is building his entire bridge using your patent. He looked up at me. He doesn't know. He never asked what I did during those 35 years, Warren. The wind off the Delaware picked up, carrying the sound of traffic from the bridge downstream. Somewhere in that ballroom behind us, my son was probably trying to salvage his wedding reception, trying to explain to his guests why the chief engineer he'd just humiliated was actually a decorated safety inspector who'd saved the life of the consultant reviewing his biggest project. Warren scrolled through the blueprints, comparing them against the patent specifications on my phone. His face had gone pale. The entire foundation system, he said. Every load-bearing calculation, every sensor placement, every stress distribution model. This is your work. 43 years of bridge inspections, I said. You see a lot of failures. You learn what works and what doesn't. I started filing the patent application in 2018 after I retired. Took me a year to get the documentation right. Warren set the tablet down on the balcony railing very carefully, like it might explode. You could halt that project tomorrow, he said. One phone call to the DOT, patent infringement, the whole contract freezes pending review. I don't want to stop it, I said. I want it built right. For 35 years, I'd signed my name to bridges that would outlive me. My son was building his fortune on one of them and didn't even know my signature was in the bedrock. Warren pulled out a second tablet from his briefcase, opened a different file. There's more, he said. Your daughter-in-law. I had her background checked when I started reviewing the Delaware project 6 months ago. Standard due diligence check all principals and immediate family for conflicts of interest. He turned the screen toward me. Maiden name Valencia. She kept it quiet, uses her married name socially, but the legal documents don't lie. 2021, there was a financial fraud investigation in New Jersey. Real estate investment scheme. Victim was a woman named Patricia Kendrick, who lost $340,000. Case was dismissed. Due to witness non-cooperation, the victim was too frightened to testify. I looked at the investigation report. Cosima's photo, younger, different hair, same sharp smile. VH Capital LLC, Warren said. The shell company she set up in the Caymans. Look at the initials. VH. Valencia. Her maiden name. She made a mistake, Warren said, trying to hide in plain sight. The initials are right there. Anyone running a proper forensic trace would catch it in 24 hours. He swiped to another document. Preston Madden found this when he traced the corporate structure. Your daughter-in-law isn't just targeting the $15 million settlement. She knows about the patent. The DOT licensing agreement is public record if you know where to look. She's got a plan B once the power of attorney is granted and you're declared incompetent. She sells the patent rights to a third-party holding company, clears another $22 million on top of the settlement. The numbers arrange themselves in my mind like bridge calculations. 15 plus 22, total assets targeted, Warren said quietly, $37 million. I stood there on that balcony looking out at the city lights, reflecting on the Delaware River. Downstream, I could see the construction lights of my son's bridge project. Cranes silhouetted against the night sky, steel and concrete rising from my designs. From my 43 years of measuring rusty bridges from every inspection report I'd filed that my son thought was worthless. The wind off the Delaware carried the smell of old water and new steel. My son was building something that would stand for 80 years. My daughter-in-law was planning to bury me alive to pay for it. So it wasn't because I was poor, I said. They came for me because I am far wealthier than they ever imagined. And they never even knew, Warren said. He closed the tablet and looked at me with an expression I'd only seen once before, the moment I pulled him from that collapsed scaffold 30 years ago. The second after the cables snapped and the platform dropped, and his life changed in the space between one breath and the next. Recognition. Understanding. The terrible clarity that comes when you realize everything you thought you knew was wrong. This isn't just about money, Warren said. No, I agreed. It's about erasing me completely while my son builds his legacy on my bones. Warren picked up both tablets, held them like evidence in a trial. How much time do we have? The settlement clears in 9 days, I said. October 27th. The moment that money hits the account, the power of attorney activates. 30 minutes later, I'm in a van to Cedarwood Care with no phone, no visitors, no way to prove I'm competent. Unless we move first, Warren said. I nodded. Preston has the documentation. The real power of attorney. The one I actually signed, giving him limited authority to monitor my accounts. We swapped it 3 weeks ago. Everything they're planning is based on a forgery that's already been flagged as fraudulent. Warren's eyes widened. They don't know. They have no idea, I said. The ballroom door opened behind us. Music and voices spilled out into the October night. The ballroom door swung open. Music and laughter spilled onto the balcony, then cut off as the door closed again. A drunk wedding guest stumbled out, looked at us, muttered something about fresh air, and wandered back inside. Warren and I didn't move. I pulled out my phone and called the one person my son trusted more than anyone, the lawyer I'd given him 3 years ago. 2 rings. Preston, I said. It's done. The recording is clean. The documents are secure. Preston Madden's voice came through the speaker, calm and professional. 4 sessions logged, every word. Good, Warren's here. He knows. Understood. I'll send the transcripts to your secure email within the hour. I hung up. Warren stared at me like he'd just watched me pull a gun from thin air. Maybe I had. Preston Madden, I said. 50 years old, corporate attorney. I introduced him to my son 3 years ago when Brent was looking for legal counsel to help structure his development company. I contacted Preston the moment the bank manager called me. He agreed to cooperate. Your son's own lawyer, Warren said slowly, has been dismantling him from inside. The real power of attorney document was pulled from the filing stack 3 weeks ago, I said. Preston replaced it with a blank sheet matching the exact format. Brent and Kozuma have been working from a neutered weapon this entire time. They just don't know it yet. Warren shook his head. And the 404 sessions? Preston wore a wire to every strategy meeting. Internal planning sessions where Brent and Kozuma detailed the entire theft plan, offshore account, routing timeline, what to tell the nursing home staff when they delivered me. Preston has recordings of all of it. The wind off the Delaware picked up. Warren gripped the balcony railing, his knuckles going white. How long have you been planning this? I looked out at the bridge construction lights downstream. The cranes. The steel rising from the riverbed on my foundation design. 3 weeks, I said, since the phone call. 3 weeks earlier, late September, Tuesday afternoon. I'd been sitting in my kitchen, coffee cooling on the counter, reading the newspaper's bridge safety column, habit from 43 years in the field. My phone vibrated on the table. Iris Townsend, Northern Trust Walnut Street branch. I'd known her for a decade, trusted her with my settlement account, when most bankers would have handed an old man's money to whoever filed the right paperwork. Mr. Garrison, she'd said, her voice tight, with something between concern and alarm. I need to speak with you privately. A power of attorney file has been submitted against your settlement disbursement account. The signature authorizing it doesn't match your file records. The pressure points are wrong. The angle is off by 3 degrees. I've held it up for review. Do you want me to freeze the request? I'd sat there at my kitchen table, coffee, going cold, newspaper, forgotten. 10 seconds of silence. Then yes, thank you, Iris. Tell no one. I hung up, stood at my kitchen window, looking out at the small yard, the fence that needed painting, the maple tree my wife had planted 30 years ago before the divorce. Then I called Warren. Then I called Preston. And from that moment, every morning I woke up counting down. Not to my son's wedding, not to the celebration or the speeches or the father-son dance we'd never have. I was counting down to the day they'd run out of room to move. For 35 years, I'd inspected bridge foundations, checking for cracks before anyone ever walked across, looking for stress fractures invisible to the naked eye, testing load-bearing capacity before thousands of tons of steel and concrete got poured. This was no different. I was just inspecting my own family. Back on the balcony, Warren was processing it all. The wedding toast, he said. You let him humiliate you in front of 200 people. You let them laugh. You sat there and took it. I needed the recording, I said. Preston has the financial documents. He has the strategy sessions. He has the forged power of attorney. But none of that proves motive without context. That toast calling me a parasite, ordering my plate removed, declaring I don't deserve to eat. That's elder abuse documented in front of witnesses. That's the missing piece that makes involuntary commitment believable as their next step. You used yourself as bait. I used myself as evidence. Warren looked at me with something between admiration and horror. 3 weeks, he said again. You've been sitting on this for 3 weeks, watching them plan, watching them prepare, letting them think they were in control. They were never in control, I said. They just thought they were. The October wind carried voices from the ballroom. Someone proposing another toast. Glasses, clinking laughter that sounded forced now that Warren's speech had thrown the whole reception off balance. What happens next? Warren asked. The settlement clears in 9 days, I said. They'll try to activate the power of attorney. The bank will flag it as fraudulent. Preston will submit the recordings and documentation to the state attorney general. And my son will realize that the useless old man he spent 36 years underestimating just destroyed his entire plan. Warren's hand gripped the balcony railing harder. There's one more piece, he said. Isn't there something you haven't told me yet? I looked at him. You said you called me 3 weeks ago, Warren continued. Then Preston. But there was another call. I can see it in your face. Who else did you call that afternoon? The Delaware River flowed dark below us. Construction lights reflected on the surface like scattered stars. Not who, I said. When? Warren waited. That morning, I said, before Iris called. My grandson called me. Silas. He's 4 years old. He'd overheard his parents talking the night before. He asked me if I really had to go live somewhere else soon, like Daddy said. Warren's expression shifted. That's when I knew, I said. Before the bank, before the paperwork, before any of it. I knew because my grandson was scared enough to call me and ask if they were sending me away. The balcony door opened again. This time it wasn't a drunk guest. It was my son. Brent stood in the doorway, tuxedo rumpled face pale. He opened his mouth, closed it, turned around and walked back inside without saying a word. I didn't sleep that night. The phone rang at 7:20 the next morning, and I knew before I answered it would be the call that broke me. I was sitting in my bedroom, still wearing yesterday's flannel, watching October light cut through the blinds. The phone vibrated. Silas's number. My grandson. Grandpa. Silas, 4 years old, had the kind of innocent voice that could crack through concrete and straight into an old man's chest. Hey, bud, I said. You're up early. Grandpa. He paused, breathing uncertain. Daddy said you have to go live somewhere else soon. Do you want to go, Grandpa? My hand tightened on the phone. Did Daddy say that? Did he mention where, Bud? I don't know, but he said you won't be living there anymore. He told Mommy last night after the party. I heard them. 4 years old. Overhearing his parents plan to erase his grandfather. Grandpa, please don't go. For the first time through the suit swap, the humiliation, my son calling me a parasite, my voice cracked. I'm not going anywhere, son, I said, swallowing hard. I promise you. Promise. Promise. Footsteps in the background, then Cosima's voice. Silas, who are you talking to? The line went dead. I set the phone down, looked in the mirror, and decided today was the last day. They got to think I was just a helpless old man. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a briefing room at the FBI Philadelphia field office. Special Agent Celeste Ramsey sat across from me, 45 years old, FBI jacket over crisp white shirt. She'd built a career dismantling elder fraud operations, 37 successful prosecutions. She laid out the protocols with clinical efficiency. Your settlement account was flagged 7 days prior to the wedding, she said, pulling up a timeline on the monitor. October 11th. The exact moment your bank filed the irregular power of attorney report. October 11th, 7 days before I sat at table 18. All transactions have been monitored in real time since that date, Agent Ramsey continued. We've embedded a tracking protocol into the VH Capital LLC account route in the Cayman Islands. The moment anyone attempts to wire funds from your settlement account to that shell company, it triggers an automatic freeze and generates a federal seizure warrant. She tapped a key. The monitor showed a flowchart account, numbers, routing codes, trigger points highlighted in red. The wire won't go through. It will fail immediately. And we'll have documentation of the attempt plus all communications Preston Madden recorded. Warren sat beside me, taking notes. We have enough evidence to execute arrests right now, Mr. Garrison, Agent Ramsey said. Conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse, forgery, wire fraud across international borders. We don't need to wait. I looked at the monitor, at the red trigger points. I want them to push the button, I said. Agent Ramsey's expression didn't change. I want them to initiate the wire transfer themselves. I want them to see that screen turn red. I want them to know their own hands lock the cage. Warren looked at me. Agent Ramsey nodded slowly. When does the settlement clear? Warren asked. 6 a.m. tomorrow, Agent Ramsey said. October 20th. Then we wait until they try to move it, I said. 7 days ago, they'd been walking around with a loaded gun that had no bullets, and they never even checked the chamber. Agent Ramsey closed her laptop. They'll move fast. The moment that settlement hits your account, they'll attempt the transfer. Based on Preston Madden's recordings, they've already prepared the wire authorization forms. They just need your signature on the backup documents. Backup documents, I asked. Secondary power of attorney, Warren said, in case the first one gets challenged. Standard fraud protocol. They'll have you sign multiple versions, date them differently, create confusion in the legal record. Agent Ramsey nodded. Your son and daughter-in-law will likely attempt to pressure you into signing additional documents before the settlement clears. You'll need to go to their house. You'll need to sign. Warren leaned forward, voice low. Edmund, they're going to come at you hard. If they suspect anything, they'll move the timeline up. They can't, Agent Ramsey said. We've flagged the Cedarwood Care intake paperwork. Any attempt to execute that placement triggers an immediate welfare check. She looked at me. But Warren's right. They're going to pressure you. You'll need to act convincing. Sign the documents like you don't know they're worthless. Let them think they're in control. I thought about Silas's voice on the phone that morning, 4 years old, asking if Grandpa had to go away. I know, I said. That's exactly what I'm planning to do. Warren's face went pale. You're going to walk into their house and sign documents that authorize them to steal everything from you and lock you in a nursing home. Documents that don't work, I said. Documents that are already flagged as fraudulent. Documents that will add another charge when they try to use them. Agent Ramsey stood up. We'll have surveillance. Audio if you're willing to wear a wire. Video from the street. The moment you're in danger, we move. I won't be in danger, I said. They need me cooperative. They need me signing papers willingly, or the whole plan falls apart. I stood up. When do they want me there? Agent Ramsey checked her phone. Preston says your son called him this morning. Asked him to facilitate a document signing session this afternoon, 2 p.m., their house. 4 hours. I looked at Warren, then at Agent Ramsey. Then I'll see you at 2. Warren grabbed my arm as we walked out. This is insane. No, I said. This is structural engineering. You identify the weak point. You apply pressure. You wait for the collapse. At 1:45, Agent Ramsey fitted the wire under my shirt, small microphone taped to my chest, battery pack at the small of my back. 15 minutes later, I was standing on my son's front porch. I knocked on the door at 2 in the afternoon, carrying nothing but the weight of what I was about to let him think he'd won. Cosima answered. She wore a cream cashmere sweater and a smile so sweet it could have come from a greeting card, like the wedding reception had never happened. Like her husband hadn't called me a parasite in front of 200 people 20 hours ago. Father, she said, the word dripping with false warmth. Please come in. The living room was expensive custom furniture art on the walls that probably cost more than my pension. Cosima gestured to the leather couch. A crystal water glass sat on a coaster on the side table, condensation already forming. She'd thought of everything. Please sit. Can I get you anything? I'm fine, I said. Brent emerged from the home office. He wouldn't look at me directly, just nodded once and sat in the armchair across from the couch, his posture stiff. On the coffee table between us, a thick stack of legal documents, maybe 40 pages. A pen placed neatly beside them, angled just so. Cosima sat on the couch, arm one hand resting lightly on Brent's shoulder. Father, these are the senior care and asset protection structures, she said, her voice smooth as silk. We just want to ensure you receive the finest care possible. Signing this is truly what's best for you. We'll find you a beautiful, quiet place to enjoy your retirement. She smiled again, that same sharp smile from the wedding, but softer now. Practiced. I reached forward and picked up the document stack. Pretended to scan the first page slowly. My eyes moved across the legal language: power of attorney, financial management authorization, healthcare proxy facility placement consent. Inside, I knew this was the dummy copy Preston had swapped out 3 weeks ago. The real document was long gone, already flagged as fraudulent in the federal banking system. These papers had no legal weight. They were props in a performance. But I had to make them believe I didn't know that. I turned a page, squinted at the fine print, turned another page. Take your time, Cosima said. We want you to feel comfortable with everything. Brent shifted in his chair. His jaw was tight. I kept reading, slowly, deliberately. Another page, another. Brent's foot started tapping against the floor. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. It never shook once in 35 years of signing off on structural safety. 35 years I'd signed documents that held up bridges. This signature would help tear one down. I held the pen over the signature line. Brent's patience snapped. Just sign it already. His voice cut through the room like a blade. He lunged forward, snatched the pen from my hand, and hurled it onto the coffee table. It hit with a sharp crack. You're old, your mind is going. What do you need to keep that accident settlement money for? Let me manage it. What does a washed-up engineer know about high-end investments anyway? Cosima's hand tightened on his shoulder, a warning gesture he ignored. Sign it so my wife and I can handle real business. Brent continued, his face flushed. Do you have any idea how much it costs to support your failing health? Don't make me force your hand. The room went silent. I looked at my son for a single second. Saw the man he'd become. Saw the calculation in his eyes, the impatience, the contempt. Then I leaned down and signed. My handwriting was steady. The signature looked exactly like it always did, controlled, precise. The letters formed the same way they'd been formed on 217 bridge inspection reports. I placed the pen down on the coffee table, stood up, walked to the door without uttering a word. My son had just shown me exactly who he'd become, and someone else had seen it too. Outside the window, barely visible through the sheer curtains, Ruth Lancaster stood frozen on the porch. My 72-year-old neighbor, retired schoolteacher who'd taught elementary school for 40 years. She'd come to pick up the spare house key she kept for me. We'd arranged it weeks ago, before any of this started. She was holding that key in one hand, the other hand raised halfway to knock. She'd heard every shouted word. I saw her face through the glass. Shock, horror, recognition. I opened the door and stepped out into the October sunlight. Ruth stood there, key still clutched in her hand, her face pale. Luther, she whispered. I shook my head slightly. Not here. Not now. She understood. Nodded once. Slipped the key into my hand, warm from where she'd been gripping it, and walked quickly down the porch steps toward her own house next door. Behind me, through the still open door, I heard Brent's voice. Finally, call Preston. Tell him we need the bank routing confirmed by tomorrow morning. Cosima's response was quieter, but I caught it, already done. I walked down the steps across the lawn to my car parked at the curb. My hands were empty, but I didn't need anything in them anymore. Through Brent's home office window, second floor corner room, I could see him already on the phone, probably calling Cosima's Cayman contact to finalize the wire route. Making sure everything was ready for the moment that settlement cleared at 6 a.m. tomorrow. He had no idea. The gun he was holding had been unloaded 3 weeks ago. I got in my car, closed the door, sat there for 10 seconds, hands on the steering wheel. The wire under my shirt had recorded everything. Brent's verbal abuse, his admission that they were taking the settlement, his threat to force my hand. Ruth had witnessed it all through the window. I started the engine. Tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. that settlement would clear. By 6:15, Brent would attempt the wire transfer to BH Capital LLC. By 6:16, the screen would turn red, the account would freeze, and federal seizure protocols would activate. By 7 a.m., Agent Ramsey would have enough evidence to execute arrest warrants. I pulled away from the curb. In my rearview mirror, I saw Ruth standing at her own window watching me leave, her hand pressed against the glass. She'd be fine. She'd seen what she needed to see. And tomorrow when the FBI came, she'd remember every word. I drove home, pulled into my driveway, and sat in the car for 5 minutes with the engine off. The wire was still taped to my chest. I could feel the battery pack pressing against my spine. I was home less than 2 hours when Warren called with the kind of silence that meant he'd found something I wouldn't want to see. "Luther," he said. His voice was heavier than usual. "We need to talk. Now." I put him on speaker and set the phone on my kitchen table. "I'm listening." While compiling the project data logs to build our legal evidence file, I uncovered a catastrophic engineering error in the Delaware Bridge blueprints. My hand stopped halfway to the coffee pot. PRP7, Warren continued. The anchor depth fails to meet AASHTO standards for saturated clay beds along the riverbank. The calculations are off by almost 30%. It won't collapse tomorrow, Edmund, but within 15 to 20 years, it faces severe differential settlement. The foundation will shift. The span will crack. I close my eyes. 43 years. 217 bridge inspections. I'd never missed a structural that mattered. And here was my son's biggest project. $340 million, his entire career, built on a foundation that wouldn't hold. "You could let it slide," Warren said quietly. "Nobody would know. The error wouldn't surface for years. Long after the criminal case is settled. Long after your son is—" "How bad?" I interrupted. "Bad enough that people could die if it's not corrected. Not immediately, but eventually." I stood at my kitchen window, looking out at the maple tree in the backyard. The one my ex-wife had planted 30 years ago before the divorce. "You know this could actually shield your son from a criminal negligence charge regarding public safety down the line," Warren asked. "If you report it now, force the revision, there's no future liability. If you let it go, and it fails in 20 years, and the investigation traces back to these blueprints—" "I know," I said, "but I don't build bridges out of hatred." Warren was quiet for a long moment. "File it with the FHWA," I said. "Standard procedure. Force an immediate engineering revision." "Edmund," Warren, I spent 35 years signing my name to documents that meant people could cross bridges safely. I'm not going to stop now because one of those bridges happens to belong to my son. For 35 years, I'd inspected foundations before anyone crossed them. Every signature meant lives depending on my judgment. This was no different. "Understood," Warren said. "I'll prepare the documentation." "I'll do it," I said. "Send me the calculations. I'll write the report myself." 20 minutes later, I was sitting at my old drafting table in the study. The table was vintage, bought it in 1987, solid oak, still perfectly level. My laptop sat on top of its screen, glowing in the afternoon light. Warren had sent the files. Blueprints, soil analysis reports, load calculations. I opened them one by one. The error jumped out immediately. Whoever had designed PRP7 had used the wrong soil classification, treated saturated clay like stable bedrock. The anchor depth was calculated for dry conditions, not the riverbank reality. Basic mistake. Fatal mistake. I started typing the FHWA engineering report. Standard format I'd used 1,000 times. Project identification, location coordinates, deficiency description, risk assessment, recommended corrective action. My phone buzzed. Warren again. "One more thing," he said. "The FBI surveillance software captured the conversation between your son and daughter-in-law immediately after you left their house this afternoon." I kept typing. "Your son told Cosima to move the money to clear his bank debt. First, then start allocating an allowance back to you. Monthly payments. He thinks he's just borrowing the capital temporarily, using it to stabilize his company, then returning it to you over time. My fingers paused on the keyboard, and my daughter-in-law, she smiled, Warren said, nodded, said nothing. The FBI analysts reviewed the footage 3 times. She has no intention of paying an allowance. There is no investment portfolio. There is only the Cayman account and a nursing home check-in file she's hidden from him. I stared at the screen, at the engineering report that would save my son's bridge project from catastrophic failure. Brent doesn't fully comprehend the depth of the crime he's tied to. The most dangerous player in a game isn't the one who knows everything. It's the one who thinks he knows enough. My son is being set up by his own wife, I said quietly. Yes, Warren said, and he has no idea. My son was being betrayed by his own wife, and he had no idea the knife was already in his back. The FBI knows. They've been monitoring his computer screen remotely since yesterday. They can see every email he sends, every document he opens. Agent Ramsey says it strengthens the case, shows your daughter-in-law is the primary architect. Your son is a secondary player who doesn't understand the full scope. Does that help him? In sentencing, possibly. In avoiding charges, no. I went back to typing. Finished the deficiency description. Started the risk assessment section. When does the settlement clear? I asked. 6 a.m. tomorrow, October 20th. And they'll try the wire transfer immediately. According to Preston's recordings, yes. Your daughter-in-law has the routing codes ready. The moment that money hits your account, she'll initiate the transfer to VH Capital LLC and the FBI. The second that transfer is attempted, the account freezes. Federal seizure warrant auto-generates. Agent Ramsey will have arrest teams positioned by 5 a.m. I typed the final section. Recommended corrective action, immediate foundation. Redesign pier. P7 anchor depth revision, third-party soil testing verification. Signed my name at the bottom. Submitted the report at 5:47 p.m. It was the last time in my life I would ever sign my name to a structural review. I wanted it to be the one that mattered. I closed the laptop and looked at the old photo on my desk. Brent, at 8 years old, in a yellow hard hat, standing beside me on a bridge job site, grinning like he'd just discovered the whole world. He'd asked me that day what I did for work, and I'd told him I make sure bridges don't fall down. Can I do that when I grow up? He'd asked. If you want to, I'd said. He'd wanted to build them instead. Bigger, better, more expensive. And somehow in all that ambition, he'd forgotten the part about making sure they don't fall down. Tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, $15 million would hit my account, and the trap I'd spent 3 weeks building would finally spring itself shut around the man in that photograph. 8 o'clock, October 19th. The settlement would clear in exactly 10 hours. I sat at my kitchen table in the dark with an album full of ghosts and a dinner I could not eat, turning the pages slowly. I turned a page in the album. My son, at 8 years old, standing next to me on a bridge job site, wearing a tiny hard hat, 3 sizes too big, grinning like he'd just discovered the whole world. Next to it, a photo of my grandson at the park last summer, swinging so high his feet kicked the sky. There was no photo of last night's wedding. I'd brought my camera, never took it out of the bag. My phone vibrated on the table. Preston. The settlement funds released tomorrow at 6 a.m., he said without preamble. They will execute the transfer immediately. I know, I said. I'm ready. The FBI surveillance is active. Every screen, every phone, every keystroke. The moment she initiates that wire, they'll have her. Good. Preston was quiet for a moment. Edmund, are you certain about this once it starts? I'm certain. I hung up, stared at the childhood photo of my son. My expression wasn't bitter. It was the face of a man shutting a heavy iron door, the kind that locks from the outside and doesn't open again. Tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, $15 million would hit my account, and the trap would spring itself. I closed the album, set it on the shelf beside 43 years of bridge inspection manuals, turned off the kitchen light. What I learned later, what the FBI surveillance captured, happened 90 minutes after I went to bed. 9:30 p.m. Cosima's private study in my son's house. Second floor corner room door locked. She sat at her desk with her laptop open and a burner phone in her hand. Dialed a number. 2 rings. Cedarwood Care Facility night intake. Cosima's voice was calm, professional. The same voice she'd used that afternoon when she'd called me father and smiled like butter wouldn't melt. This is Cosima Garrison. I'm bringing my father-in-law down tomorrow afternoon. Ensure the secure room in the rear wing is fully prepped. No outside contact or unapproved communication. He suffers from severe clinical paranoia. A pause. The intake coordinator asked a question the FBI audio couldn't quite catch. No visitors, Cosima said. No phone calls, no mail. We'll handle all medical decisions through the family trust. You have the power of attorney documentation on file. Another pause. Yes, cash payment. The full deposit will transfer tomorrow morning. She hung up, set the burner phone down on the desk, turned to her laptop. The FBI cyber surveillance team watched her screen in real time from a monitoring station 3 miles away. Every pixel, every cursor movement, every letter she typed. She logged into the VH Capital LLC interface. Cayman Islands banking portal encrypted connection, the kind of system designed to hide money from governments and ex-spouses and anyone asking uncomfortable questions. Navigated to the transfer queue. Clicked new transaction. The form populated. Source account empty field waiting. Destination account, she typed a long string of numbers and letters. Routing code. Swift identifier. Account holder name listed as VH Capital Holdings Ltd. Amount, she typed the numbers slowly, deliberately. I was in $15 million. US currency. She double-checked the routing destination. Clicked Queue transaction. The screen changed. Transaction pending awaiting source funding validation. She sat back in her chair, smiled. That smile the FBI agents watching the surveillance feed would later describe it in their report as indicative of premeditation and malicious intent. Clinical language for something that looked on the screen like pure satisfaction. She thought she was hunting me. She didn't know she was already in the cage. On the other side of that digital line, FBI cyber analysts were recording every keystroke, logging the transaction queue, documenting the account numbers, the routing codes, the timestamp, evidence, irrefutable, digital fingerprints that would hold up in federal court because she'd typed them herself from her own laptop, using her own login credentials in her own locked study. She had no idea someone was reading every letter she typed in real time. At Nini 45, she closed the laptop, picked up the burner phone, deleted the call log, powered it off, put it in the bottom drawer of her desk under a stack of file folders, stood up, stretched, checked her reflection in the window, adjusted her hair, smoothed her sweater, walked downstairs to join my son in the living room like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just cued the financial destruction of a 69-year-old man and confirmed his involuntary commitment to a facility where he'd have no phone, no visitors, no way to call for help. Brent was watching television, some news program. He looked up when she entered. Everything set for tomorrow, he asked. She smiled, sat beside him on the couch, rested her hand on his knee. Everything's perfect, she said. He nodded, turned back to the television. He still thought they were borrowing the money temporarily. Still thought there'd be an allowance paid back to me monthly. Still thought his father would live in comfortable retirement while the company debt got cleared. He had no idea. His wife had just queued a one-way wire transfer to an offshore account and reserved a locked room in a facility 2 hours away. The FBI knew. I would know later when Agent Ramsey showed me the surveillance footage. But that night, lying in bed at 10 o'clock, I only knew what Preston had told me. They would execute the transfer immediately. I didn't sleep. I lay there watching the ceiling, watching the shadows from the streetlight move across the plaster as cars passed outside, watching the clock on my nightstand tick past midnight, past 2 a.m., past 3. At 5:30, I got up, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table in the dark. Waiting, I made coffee at 5:30, sat at the kitchen table in the dark, waiting for 6 o'clock. I sat in that kitchen darkness, watching the clock tick towards 6 a.m. But the night before the coffee, before the waiting, the phone had rung at 10:15. Warren called me with the kind of news that meant the FBI had just found another nail for the coffin. Luther, the FBI, uncovered an additional cog in the scheme. I was already in bed, lying in the dark, not sleeping, just waiting for tomorrow. Go ahead. A low-level compliance clerk at the local bank branch. Marcus Brennan, the individual who pushed through the initial power of attorney paperwork, accepted a bribe from your daughter-in-law to bypass verification checks. I sat up. How much? $8,500. Paper trail reveals a direct transfer from her personal account to the clerk's private account. 3 weeks before the wedding, the same week she filed the fraudulent POA. Marcus Brennan, a junior compliance clerk in the bank's POA processing department. I'd probably walked past his desk a dozen times over the years, never knowing his name. $8,500. They'd bought a bank employee. For less than $10,000, they thought they could buy my erasure. The clerk's arrest warrant is being added to the stack, Warren said. He'll be taken into custody tomorrow morning, same time as your son and daughter-in-law. Good, I said. My voice was flat. Let the law handle it. Agent Ramsey wants you at the field office in 45 minutes. She has something else to show you. I got dressed, drove to the FBI Philadelphia field office through empty streets. October 19th, 11 p.m. The city was quiet. Warren met me in the lobby. We took the elevator to the third floor. Briefing room, same one we'd used that morning. Celeste Ramsey was waiting, laptop open on the conference table. Mr. Garrison, she said, we've been reviewing hotel security footage from the Grand Harrington, October 18th, the afternoon before the wedding reception. She turned the laptop screen toward me. Grainy footage. Hallway outside my hotel room. Timestamp 3:47 p.m. I watched myself check in, watched the bellhop bring my bags up, watched him leave. 40 minutes passed and fast forward. Then the hallway door opened. Cosima stepped into frame. She was wearing casual clothes, jeans, a sweater. Not the wedding dress yet. That would come later for the reception at 6:30. She walked to my door, pulled out a key card. Not her key card, a duplicate procured somehow. She told the front desk she needed to retrieve a forgotten item for family, Celeste said. They gave her access without question. The bride's father-in-law forgot his medications, family emergency. The clerk didn't verify. On screen, Cosima swiped the card. The door opened. She went inside. 3 minutes later, she emerged, carrying a small garment bag. My suit. The charcoal gray one I'd bought specifically for the wedding. The one that had disappeared from my suitcase, replaced with my oldest flannel work shirt. She'd taken it. 40 minutes after I checked in. 4 hours before the reception started. I watched her walk down the hallway and disappear around the corner. The timestamp read 4:33 p.m. I wondered where that suit went, I said. Celeste nodded. Clear evidence of prior intent. Planning before the event. This seals the federal conspiracy charge. It proves the humiliation at the reception was premeditated, part of a larger pattern of elder abuse designed to establish your incompetence in front of witnesses. Warren leaned forward. They began building their trap before the first guest arrived. I stared at the frozen frame on the screen. Cosima's face caught mid-stride, carrying my suit away. The suit I'd packed carefully that morning, thinking I'd wear it to my son's wedding. Thinking I'd at least look presentable while he married the woman who was planning to erase me. How long had she been planning this? Had she smiled at me across the dinner table while already holding the key to my hotel room? When did it truly start? The day they met? Or the day my son decided an old man was too soft to fight back? We have everything we need, Celeste said, closing the laptop. The forged power of attorney, the bribed bank clerk, the recorded strategy sessions from Preston, the hotel footage proving premeditated humiliation, the cued Cayman wire transfer, the Cedarwood facility reservation. Tomorrow morning when they push that wire button, we'll be watching. She looked at me with an expression I'd seen before on engineers, reviewing failed foundations, the recognition that a structure was doomed before the first beam was placed. The only question left is, are you ready to watch your son get arrested? I looked at the dark laptop screen where Cosima's face had been frozen mid-stride. I've been ready for 3 weeks, I said. Warren drove me home past midnight. The streets were empty. I sat in the passenger seat watching the city lights pass, thinking about that hotel footage. She'd stolen my suit at 3:47 in the afternoon. By 6:30 that evening, I was sitting at table 18 in my flannel shirt, while 200 people stared. By 8:45, my son was calling me a parasite into a microphone. By 9 o'clock, Warren was standing beside me on the balcony, showing me the patent number that proved my son's entire career was built on my foundation. And now, at 12:30 a.m. on October 20th, I was home, sitting in my living room, looking at the clock on the wall. 5.5 hours until the settlement cleared. 5.5 hours until Cosima pushed the button that would lock her in a federal cage. I didn't try to sleep. I made coffee at 5:30, sat at the kitchen table in the dark, waiting for 6 a.m. Ready. Tomorrow at 6 o'clock. I'd have my answer. I'd know if 3 weeks of planning, 3 weeks of letting them think they'd won, 3 weeks of being 3 steps ahead while they humiliated me, I'd know if it was all worth it. I thought it would be. I sipped my coffee and watched the clock tick toward dawn. The clock in the FBI briefing room had shown 12:15 when Celeste dismissed us. Warren and I walked through the empty corridors past the security desk through the glass doors. We stepped into the October cold past midnight, and Warren's hand found my shoulder the same way it had at the wedding, like he was steadying himself as much as me. The parking lot was nearly empty. A handful of cars scattered across the asphalt, streetlights casting orange pools. The wind cut through my jacket, carrying the smell of autumn leaves and distant rain. Warren's car was parked near mine. We stood between the two vehicles, neither of us ready to leave yet. Are you holding up, Luther? I looked up at the Philadelphia night sky. Cloud cover, reflecting the city lights, back down, turning everything the color of old copper. No stars visible, just that endless orange glow. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the cold wind on my face. I am losing my only son, I said finally, and I'm doing the right thing. Can both of those realities be true at once, Warren? I was quiet. The wind moved dead leaves across the parking lot with a sound like paper shuffling. Yes, Warren said, and that is exactly what I asked myself 30 years ago when you pulled me out of the wreckage. You did the right thing, even when nobody asked you to. I remembered that day. Pittsburgh. The scaffold collapse. The sound of cables snapping like gunshots. Warren's voice screaming from under the twisted metal. My hands bleeding as I pulled steel beams aside, dug through the rubble, dragged him out before the whole structure came down. I hadn't thought about whether it was right or wrong. I'd just done it. That was different, I said. No, Warren said. It wasn't. You saved my life because it was the right thing to do, and it cost you. Dislocated shoulder, torn rotator cuff, 3 months of physical therapy. Your wife, your ex-wife, told me years later that you were never quite the same after that. The injury changed how you worked. I'd forgotten he knew that. But you did it anyway, Warren continued, because the alternative was watching someone die when you had the power to prevent it. That's what tomorrow is, Edmund. You're preventing something catastrophic. You're saving lives, maybe not from a bridge collapse, but from a predator who's already destroyed multiple victims and would keep destroying more. For 35 years, I'd built bridges meant to last generations. Tonight, I was dismantling the one that mattered most. I've been monitoring this situation for 6 months, Warren said quietly. I looked at him. The moment Garrison Development took the Delaware contract, he continued, the moment I saw your son's company name on my review list, I started tracking them. Standard due diligence at first. Background checks. Financial audits. But things didn't add up. Shell companies. Irregular transfers. Your daughter-in-law's name appearing in places it shouldn't. 6 months. Half a year. You've been watching over me all along, I said. Warren nodded. I tried to find a way to warn you that wouldn't compromise the investigation. But every time I came close, I realized you already knew. That phone call 3 weeks ago when you told me about the POA filing, I knew then. You'd figured it out before I could tell you. The October wind picked up. I pulled my jacket tighter. I should have seen it sooner, I said. Should have known what she was. No, Warren said firmly. You saw your son happy. You saw him building something. You wanted to believe he'd found someone good. That's not blindness. That's hope. And they weaponized it. A car drove past on the street beyond the parking lot. Headlights cutting through the darkness, then gone. Tomorrow morning at 5:45 a.m. I said I will stand outside my son's door for the last time. Not to apologize, not to forgive, to bear witness. You don't have to be there, Warren said. Agent Ramsey can handle the arrest without... I have to be there. Warren studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. I'll be there too, he said. You won't be alone. I looked at Warren one last time before getting in my truck. He'd saved my life by letting me save his 30 years ago. Now he was saving it again by standing beside me while I lost my son. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet, Warren said. Tomorrow is going to be the hardest day of your life. I know. I opened my truck door. The hinges creaked. Needed oil. Had needed oil for 2 years, kept meaning to fix it. Some things you let slide because they're not structural. Some things you can live with. I climbed in, started the engine. It turned over rough, caught settled into its familiar rattle. Warren stood in the parking lot, hands in his coat pockets watching me. I put the truck in gear and drove down the empty Philadelphia streets past 1 in the morning. The October wind cut through gaps in the weather, stripping the same way it had for 15 years. The heater rattled. The radio was off. I thought about tomorrow, 5:45 a.m., standing outside my son's door. Not to apologize. I hadn't done anything wrong. Not to forgive. Some things you can't forgive, and remain who you are. To bear witness. To be there when the trap I'd built for 3 weeks finally closed. To look my son in the eye one last time before the handcuffs went on. To let him see that I knew, that I'd always known, that the old man he'd humiliated at table 18 had been 3 steps ahead the entire time. In less than 5 hours, $15 million would hit my account. In less than 6 hours, my son would be in handcuffs. And somewhere in between those 2 moments, I would have to decide whether a father could watch his own son's arrest without breaking completely. I drove home, parked in my driveway, Sat in the truck for 10 minutes with the engine off, listening to the metal tick as it cooled. Then I went inside, set the alarm for 5:30. Tomorrow would come whether I slept or not. I sat at that kitchen table in the dark until the clock showed 5:50. Then I went upstairs, lay down on my bed fully dressed, stared at the ceiling, waited. The phone buzzed at 6 a.m. in 3 seconds, and I knew without looking that $15 million had just become the bait in a trap I'd spent 3 weeks building. I picked it up. Bank notification. Northern Trust. The message filled the screen. Your account ending in 4491 has been credited with a wire transfer of $15,000 at 06:03 a.m. I read the text, placed the phone face down on the nightstand, stared at the ceiling. No celebration, no sigh of relief. I remained motionless for 30 seconds. Then I sat up, buttoned my shirt, went downstairs, started the coffee maker. Dawn hadn't broken yet. The kitchen window showed nothing but darkness and my own reflection in the glass. Simultaneously across Philadelphia, in 3 different rooms, 3 different screens told 3 different stories. Mine said the money had arrived. The FBI said the trap was armed. Hers said it was time to pull the trigger. What I learned later from the surveillance footage Agent Ramsey showed me. At the FBI Philadelphia Field Office Cyber Unit, a monitor flashed green at exactly 6:04 a.m. Text appeared: target account funded, monitoring active. The overnight analyst, a 26-year-old named Rodriguez, who'd been watching that screen for 8 hours, sat up straighter, picked up the phone, called Agent Ramsey. We're live at my son's house, in the master bedroom. Cosima's phone lit up on the nightstand. She'd been awake for 10 minutes already, lying in bed beside my son, waiting. The notification read: VH Capital System alert, source funds verified, wire execution authorized. She smiled, rolled over, nudged Brent awake. The money just landed. I drank my coffee, looked out the window, and waited for Warren's call telling me they were moving. It came at 6:45. Edmund, she's in motion. They left the house 12 minutes ago, heading downtown to his corporate office. Understood. The tactical team is already positioned. We're waiting for her to initiate the wire. The moment she clicks that button, we move. I know. Are you? I'm fine, Warren. I wasn't fine, but I was ready. I hung up, finished my coffee, put on my jacket, drove downtown. What happened at my son's office I learned later from the FBI recordings, but I'll tell it now because it's the moment everything I'd built for 3 weeks finally came to a point. 8:30 a.m. Brent's corporate suite on the 12th floor of a glass and steel tower in downtown Philadelphia. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Delaware River. Modern furniture, expensive art. The kind of office that says success. Cosima sat at Brent's desk, laptop open in front of her. 2 coffee cups beside the computer. My son stood behind her shoulder watching the screen. The VH Capital LLC portal was open. Cayman Islands banking interface. Encrypted. Supposedly secure. She typed commands into the wire transfer form. Source account: Luther Garrison Northern Trust account ending in 4491. Destination account: a long string of numbers and codes. Routing through 3 different shell corporations before landing in an account only she could access. Amount $15,000. She paused, looked up at Brent. The money is resting in the old man's account. I'm executing the transfer to the Cayman shell route right now. She turned back to the screen, typed the confirmation code. He spent his whole life building bridges, she said, her voice cold. He can use this money to buy his own grave. Brent stared at the numbers on the screen. $15 million about to vanish into an account he'd never see again. A sudden spike of anxiety hit him. I could see it in the footage later, the way his hand tightened on the back of the chair, but he stayed quiet. Cosima's finger moved to the mouse, hovered over the button. Send. 1 click. That's all it would take. 1 click to initiate a wire transfer that would trigger federal alarms across 3 states. 1 click to prove conspiracy. 1 click to lock the cage. Her finger tightened on the mouse. Click. The sound, soft, barely audible, was the loudest thing in that office. Her finger pressed down. The mouse clicked. And somewhere in a server room between Philadelphia and the Cayman Islands, a line of code that had been waiting for 3 weeks finally woke up. I didn't need to be in that office to know what was about to happen. I'd built enough fail-safe systems in my career to recognize one when I'd triggered it myself. The screen would freeze for exactly 2 seconds. Then it would change. The confirmation message Cosima expected: transfer initiated, processing time 24-48 hours, would never appear. Something else would take its place. Something red. I was 3 blocks away when Warren called again. She clicked it. We're moving. I pulled over, parked on a side street, sat with my hands on the steering wheel, In that corporate suite 12 floors up, FBI tactical teams were already moving into position in the hallway. Agent Ramsey had her badge ready. The arrest warrants were signed. Cosima was staring at a computer screen that was about to tell her everything she'd planned for months had failed. My son was standing behind her, about to learn that his wife had been using him. And I was sitting in my truck 3 blocks away, about to find out if a father could watch his only son get arrested without breaking completely. My phone buzzed. Text from Warren: breach in 30 seconds. I closed my eyes. 30 seconds. 29, 28. Somewhere above me, in that glass tower, my son's life was ending, and I was the one who'd pulled the trigger. I counted down in my head. 30, 29, 28. The screen turned red before she could even lift her finger off the mouse. What I learned later from the surveillance footage: the laptop screen flashed blinding crimson. Bold text overpowered the entire window. Transaction blocked, flagged for wire fraud and financial elder abuse. FBI case number 2025 PHL 4471. 1 second of absolute dead silence. Cosima stared at the monitor. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. Then the heavy double doors split off their hinges. FBI hands up, nobody move. Lead agent +4. Armed tacticals flooded the room. Black tactical gear. Weapons drawn. Moving with practiced precision. Brent froze, hands trembling. Cosima bolted upright from the desk chair, spinning toward the doorway. And there she saw him. Me. Standing right behind the lead federal agent, Warren at my flank. She understood instantly. The color drained completely from her face. Her eyes met mine across that corporate suite, floor-to-ceiling windows. Expensive art, the office that said success, and I saw the exact moment she realized. 3 weeks. She'd been walking into a trap for 3 weeks. The agent was reading them their rights. I didn't hear a word of it. I only looked at my son one last time. Brent stood there, hands raised, staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. The steel cuffs locked around his wrists with a sound like a car door closing. Final. Irreversible. I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. The security door clicked shut as they led him out. 35 years I'd signed off on structural integrity. This was the first time I'd ever signed off on a structures-controlled demolition. Warren's hand found my shoulder. Edmund, you need to see this. 9:15 a.m. FBI interrogation room at the Philadelphia field office. Cold white fluorescent glare. Brushed metal table bolted to the floor. 2 chairs. One-way mirror on the wall. Brent sat on one side, entirely alone. His private counsel hadn't arrived yet. The cuffs were off, but his wrists showed red marks where the steel had pressed. I stood in the observation room, on the other side of that mirror. Warren beside me. Agent Ramsey operating the audio equipment. She placed a digital recording device on the interrogation table. Pressed play. Cosima's voice filled the room. Smooth. Calculating. The same voice that had called me father 48 hours ago. I'm bringing my father-in-law down tomorrow afternoon. Ensure the secure room in the rear wing is fully prepped. No outside contact or unapproved communication. He suffers from severe clinical paranoia. Brent flinched, straightened up in his chair. What? His voice cracked. What recording is this? The agent sat across from him, face impassive. Cedar Wood Care Facility outside Harrisburg. Your wife booked an involuntary placement unit for your father 2 days before your wedding. Did you authorize this? Brent stared at the recording device on the table. Long silence. No, he said finally, broken whisper. I didn't know. Before I tell you what happened next in that room, I need you to understand something. Comment A, if you think my son knew the full plan, or B, if you think his wife kept him in the dark, and add one reason why. This next part contains some recreated details to convey the emotional weight. The truth of what I witnessed is what matters. I watched through that 2-way mirror as my son sat in that cold interrogation room, head bowed, shoulders slumped like the weight of 3 buildings had just landed on him. For a split second, I saw the ghost of that 8-year-old boy in the yellow hard hat, standing on a bridge job site, grinning like he'd just discovered the whole world. Then the image shattered. Your wife, the agent said, initiated multiple financial instruments without your knowledge. The involuntary commitment paperwork, the offshore routing, the shell companies. Did you know she'd been planning this for over a year? Brent's head came up. A year. The first VH Capital LLC transaction we traced dates back 14 months, long before she filed the power of attorney, long before the wedding. My son's face went white. I thought... He stopped, started again. I thought we were just borrowing the money temporarily, to clear the company debt. I was going to pay him back. Monthly allowance. I told her that. The agent didn't respond. She said she'd set up the allowance. Brent continued, his voice getting higher. She said it was all arranged, investment portfolio. He'd get 15,000 a month, comfortable retirement. There is no investment portfolio, the agent said. There is only a Cayman account in her name, and a locked room at Cedarwood where your father would have no phone, no visitors, no way to contact anyone. Brent put his head in his hands. My son had just discovered his wife had betrayed him too, and I was the one who'd made him see it. The observation room door opened behind me. Agent Ramsey stepped in. Mr. Garrison, there's more. She had a file folder. Opened it. Showed me bank statements. Corporate ledgers. Numbers highlighted in yellow. We found additional theft. Your daughter-in-law has been systematically siphoning funds from your son's Delaware Bridge project. $2.34 million over 90 days. 14 unauthorized drawdowns routed to VH Capital. I stared at the numbers. She'd been stealing from him. From the beginning. From before the wedding. Before the conservatorship plan. She'd been taking his money while planning to take mine, and he'd had no idea. Through the mirror, I watched Brent sitting in that interrogation room, my only son, 36 years old, his entire life collapsing around him because he'd married a woman who'd seen him as nothing but a tool to get to me. Or maybe she'd seen us both as marks from the start. Does he know, I asked quietly, about the project theft? Not yet, Agent Ramsey said. We're about to tell him. She picked up the file, walked to the door connecting to the interrogation room. I watched through that two-way mirror as she opened the door, stepped inside, placed the bank statements on the table in front of my son, and I knew, watching his face as he read those numbers, that this was the moment he understood he'd lost everything. Agent Ramsey slid a manila folder across the steel table. Brent stared at it like it might detonate. Open it, she said. He did. The first page was a spreadsheet, columns of dates, amounts, vendor names. His company letterhead sat at the top. Garrison Engineering Solutions Delaware Bridge Rehabilitation Project 2024-2025. What is this? Brent whispered. Forensic accounting, Ramsey said. Your wife didn't just steal from you through the patent or the settlement. She stole from your own company. Over 18 months, she siphoned $2.34 million from your Delaware Bridge project. I watched through this two-way mirror, my reflection faint against the glass. Warren stood beside me, arms folded. Behind us, a junior agent. Marcus Tully, 28, crew cut, sharp enough to cut glass, held a tablet with the same spreadsheet. Brent flipped pages. Invoice after invoice. Apex Materials Consulting, $47,000. November 2024. Summit Structural Advisory, $89,500. February 2025. Horizon Engineering Services, $53,200. April 2025. These vendors don't exist, Ramsey said. Every payment went to shell accounts your wife controlled. She created fake invoices, forged your approval signatures, and routed the funds through a network that ends in the same Cayman bank as the settlement money. Brent's hands shook. $2.34 million, Ramsey corrected. While you were building that bridge, she was bleeding your company dry. You signed off on budgets. You trusted her to manage admin. She used that trust to rob you blind. He looked up, eyes wet. The whole time. Warren muttered beside me. He's starting to understand. I said nothing. I'd known this moment would come the instant Brent realized his marriage wasn't just broken. It was a con from the beginning. Ramsey leaned forward. Your wife is a professional fraudster, Mr. Garrison. She's been doing this for years, and you're not the first victim. She opened a second folder. This one had a photograph, paperclipped to the inside cover. A woman, mid-50s, graying hair pulled into a tight bun, glasses perched on a sharp nose. Patricia Kendrick, 57, civil engineer from New Jersey, Ramsey said. In 2019, she partnered with a consultant named Cosima Aldridge on a municipal road project in Newark. 6 months later, $890,000 vanished from the project fund. By the time Patricia realized what happened, Cosima was gone. Brent stared at the photo. Who is she? A witness, Ramsey said. She's outside right now, flew in this morning to testify. The door opened. Patricia Kendrick stepped inside, her eyes locking onto Brent with a mixture of pity and rage. She sat in the chair beside Ramsey, hands folded on the table. I lost everything, Patricia said quietly. My firm dissolved. I filed for bankruptcy. I spent 3 years rebuilding my reputation. And the woman who did it to me is sitting in a cell down the hall, married to you. Brent's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Patricia pulled a small notebook from her purse and slid it across the table. I kept records. every invoice she forged, every payment she rerouted. I gave all of this to the FBI 6 years ago, but they never caught her. She changed her name, moved to a different state, found a new victim. She looked at Brent with something close to sympathy. You weren't the first. You won't be the last. Ramsey pulled out a third folder, then a fourth, then a fifth. A Florida 27 men, a real estate developer named Gerald Howe, 63, lost $412,000 to a fraudulent consulting contract. Arizona 2010, a tech startup founder named Imani Brooks, 31, lost $670,000 through a fake investment fund. Vermont 2020, a construction company owner named Leon Vargas, 55, lost $1.1 million in a project management scam. Ramsey lined the folders up like evidence tags. Before you, Mr. Garrison, your wife stole a total of $3.1 million from at least 4 known victims. There may be more. We're still investigating. Brent stared at the folders. His face had gone white. Patricia stood. I hope you cooperate, she said softly, because the only way you survive this is if you help them put her away. She left. The door clicked shut. Ramsey let the silence stretch. Then she pulled out one more folder, thicker than the other's edges worn. This one's different, she said. We found it in your wife's storage unit. It's her target list. People she researched, people she planned to go after next. She opened it. The first page had a printed photograph stapled to a background check. I leaned closer to the glass. The face in the photo was Warren's. My breath stopped. Ramsey turned the page. Another photo. Another background check. This one showed a woman I didn't recognize. Dr. Naomi Hatch, 44 biomedical researcher, Philadelphia, with income records highlighted in yellow. Another page. Another target. Russell Engel, 51, patent attorney, Boston. Another. Sophia Marquez, 39, venture capitalist, Austin. Ramsey looked at Brent. Your wife wasn't done. She was already planning her next move. And one of her next targets, she tapped Warren's photo, was the man who saved your father's life. Brent's head dropped into his hands. I turned away from the glass. My chest felt tight. Warren's face, his name, his address, his financials, all cataloged in Cosima's files, like he was livestock. Warren saw my expression. I'm okay, he said. She was going to come for you. But she didn't, because you stopped her. Agent Tully stepped forward, tablet in hand. Sir, we've confirmed 7 additional victims across 4 states. Total known theft is now $4.6 million. The DOJ is considering RICO charges. I looked back through the glass. Brent sat motionless, surrounded by folders, his life dismantled in paper and ink. Ramsey closed the target folder, but as she did, one last photo slipped free and landed face up on the table. I saw it. My heart stopped. The face in that photo was someone I knew, someone I hadn't seen in 30 years. The photo was my ex-wife, Diane, taken from her LinkedIn profile. 53 years old now, silver hair cut short, still wearing that pendant I'd given her on our 10th anniversary. Cosima had researched her, flagged her pension, noted her address in Colorado. The woman I'd divorced 40 years ago was filed in a predator's dossier like prey. The phone chimed in my jacket pocket while Agent Ramsey was still talking. I pulled it out. The screen showed a message from Deputy Director Hoffman at the Department of Transportation. Contract executed. 22 mm licensing confirmed. Payout schedule. John 2026, John 2031. Congratulations, Mr. Garrison. I stared at the words. $22 million. 5-year licensing deal for my bridge sensor technology. The patent. Brent had tried to steal the invention Cosima had tried to monetize through fraud. The Department of Transportation had signed it 3 hours ago. My life's work validated, monetized, secured. 43 years of engineering. One email. 22 million reasons this should feel like victory. It felt like ash. I stood in a hallway where my son was being interrogated for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, holding proof I'd never needed his company at all. The sensor array that would monitor structural integrity on 18 federal bridges, designed in my garage, patented under my name, licensed without Brent's signature or Cosima's schemes, was going to make me wealthier than I'd ever imagined. I pocketed the phone, told no one, walked out of the FBI building alone. The October air was cold. I drove home through rush hour traffic, the radio off the DOT contract sitting in my inbox like a tombstone. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun had set. The doorbell rang at 7 o'clock. I opened it to find a woman in her mid-40s, gray blazer over a wrinkled blouse, holding a clipboard in one hand and a car seat in the other. Her eyes were tired, the kind of tired that comes from seeing too many broken families. "Mr. Garrison?" she asked. "I'm Angela Frost, county social worker. I have an emergency custody order for your grandson." She stepped aside. Behind her, sitting on my front steps, was Silas, 4 years old, Brent's son. Clutching a stuffed giraffe that had seen better days, his face streaked with dried tears, his Spider-Man jacket zipped up to his chin. "Hi, buddy," I said quietly. He looked up at me with Brent's eyes wide, confused, scared. Angela handed me the clipboard. "Both parents are in federal custody. No other immediate family willing to take placement. The court issued interim guardianship to you as the paternal grandfather. This is temporary pending the custody hearing, but for now he's yours." I signed the form. My hand didn't shake. Angela brought in the car seat, a duffel bag with clothes, a box of toys. She gave me her card, told me there'd be a follow-up visit within 72 hours, and left. Silas stood in my living room holding the giraffe. "Where's Daddy?" he whispered. "Where's Mama?" I knelt down so we were eye level. I'd spent 4 decades calculating load-bearing capacity, how much weight a structure could hold before failure. I'd never run the numbers on a 4-year-old grandson who'd just lost both parents in one night. "They're dealing with some very serious legal matters with the government," I said. "But I'm going to take care of you. I promise." "When are they coming back?" "I don't know." His lip trembled. "I'm scared." I pulled him close. His head fit under my chin. The giraffe's plastic eyes stared at me over his shoulder. "I know," I said. "I am too." We sat on the couch. I turned on the television, some cartoon about talking trains. Silas leaned against me, silent, watching the screen without really seeing it. I didn't know what 4-year-olds ate for dinner. I didn't know what time they went to bed. I didn't know how to explain that his mother had stolen millions of dollars, and his father might go to prison for helping her. I made him a peanut butter sandwich. He ate half. I ran a bath. He didn't want to get in. I found pajamas in the duffel bag, dinosaurs on blue cotton, and helped him change. "Can I sleep with you?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "You can." But he didn't make it to the bedroom. By 9:30, he was asleep on my chest, the giraffe tucked under one arm, his breathing soft and rhythmic. His breathing was the only sound in the house. Rhythmic, trusting. The weight of him against my chest, maybe 7 pounds heavier than the last time I'd held him back, when Brent still let me visit. His hair smelled like the FBI building's soap. His fingers curled around the edge of my shirt. I pulled out my phone, read the Doty email again. $22 million would rebuild every bridge I'd ever flagged as structurally deficient. It wouldn't rebuild this. Tomorrow, courthouse. Conservatorship reversal hearing. Criminal arraignment. Guardian ad litem appointment for Silas. The boy asleep on my chest deserved none of it. He'd done nothing wrong. He was 4 years old, and his world had collapsed because his grandfather had set a trap and his parents had walked into it. Pier P7 was waiting. The dot money would flow. The sensor technology would save lives. Some structures can be reinforced, some cannot. Silas shifted in his sleep, mumbled something about trains settled again. I didn't move, didn't risk waking him. Just sat there in the dark holding the wreckage of my family while $22 million sat unspent in a contract I couldn't celebrate. Tomorrow the courthouse would decide custody conservatorship arraignment schedules. Tomorrow I'd face Brent across a courtroom, father and son victim and co-conspirator, guardian and accused. The DOT money was real, the Pier P7 contract was real. But so was the boy on my chest and the wreckage of what we'd all been before Cosima. The wood paneling in Judge Mercer's courtroom was darker than I'd expected, walnut, not oak, and I noticed because I'd been staring at it for 40 minutes while they read the charges against my son. Brent sat at the defense table in a navy suit his attorney had brought him. Not the orange jumpsuit from the FBI holding cell. Not the clothes Cosima had packed for the settlement meeting. A fresh suit. Expensive. His lawyer, David Calloway, mid-40s, Stanford pedigree, visible in every gesture, had made sure of that. Judge Harold Mercer sat above us. All mid-60s, wire-rimmed glasses catching the fluorescent light, running the kind of silent courtroom where even the court reporter's keystrokes sounded loud. Prosecutor Dana Merritt stood at the lectern. I'd met her once briefly during Warren's hospital stay when she'd called about banking records. Now she was methodical, clinical, building a case like I'd built bridges, one beam at a time, load-tested, unshakable. "Exhibit 14A, she said. Audio surveillance table 18, October 17, 2025. You'll hear the defendant and co-defendant Valencia discuss the old man's transfer, direct quote. The recording played. Brent's voice, Cosima's voice, the clink of champagne glasses, laughter. Words I'd heard once already now amplified through federal speakers for a jury of 12 strangers. Dana moved through the exhibits like a surgeon. Hotel surveillance showing Brent and Cosima swapping the suit jacket. Preston's 4 wired meetings, his voice tight with fear as he played double agent. The VH Capital Ledger with Cosima's shell company highlighted in yellow. Then Exhibit 22, Cedarwood Estates intake call, Iris said, placed by Ruth Lancaster, October 16, 2025, requesting immediate involuntary commitment for Luther Garrison. The recording crackled to life. Yes, I'm calling about my ex-husband, Luther Garrison. He's 69, showing clear signs of cognitive decline. Paranoid, erratic. We're very concerned. Can you take him as early as tomorrow? Ruth's voice. Calm, professional. The same voice that had asked me to sign a postnuptial agreement 3 weeks into our marriage. The same voice that had told me she was leaving because I worked too much. My ex-wife's voice, on that recording clinical efficient, sounded exactly like it had when she asked for the divorce 31 years ago. The courtroom was silent. Ruth sat 3 rows behind me, flanked by her attorney. I didn't turn around, didn't need to. The evidence spoke. Brent's attorney kept objecting to chain of custody details, as if the problem was documentation, not the crime itself, like arguing about the blueprints while the bridge collapsed. Judge Mercer overruled him every time. Day 2 was Patricia Kendrick. She testified about the Newark project, the vanished funds, the bankruptcy. Cosima sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit. No expensive suit for her, and stared at the wall. Day 3, Brent took the stand. His attorney had prepped him. You could see it in the way he sat, shoulders back, hands folded, voice steady for the first 10 minutes. He answered questions about the company, the Delaware Bridge project, the financial pressures. Then Iris asked him about the conservatorship. The Delaware Bridge was supposed to save the company, Brent said. His voice started to shake. $8 million in debt. She said the only way out was liquidating your assets. I believed her. Did you know the conservatorship petition contained false medical statements? Iris asked. Yes. Did you sign it anyway? Yes. Why? Brent's hands gripped the witness box railing. Because I was drowning. The company was failing. I had a 4-year-old son. I needed the money. I thought... His voice broke. I thought it was temporary. I thought once the settlement cleared, we'd reverse it. I thought Dad would understand. He turned toward the gallery, toward me, tears streaming down his face. Dad, I know I was wrong, but I'm your only son. I just wanted to build something real, something you'd be proud of. The courtroom held its breath. Every eye turned to row 3, to me. Judge Mercer paused, pen midair, waiting. Brent's face was the same face that had looked up at me when he was 7 and his dog died. The same hairline fracture in his voice when he said, only son. It cracked on the second word, a break in the vocal cords I heard from 3 rows back. Silas had asked me that morning if Daddy was coming home. I'd said I didn't know. Now I did. The Delaware Bridge project was real. The debt was real. The desperation was real. But so was the conservatorship. So was the Cedarwood intake call. So was the plan to lock me away and take everything I'd built in 43 years. I'd spent 3 weeks building a trap. 200 hours of wire recordings. 4 federal agents. 1 sting operation that had burned through every relationship I had left. And now my son, my only son, was asking me to forgive him in front of a jury that would decide if he went to prison. I could sit, let the silence answer, let the prosecutors finish, take Silas home and never look back. Or I could stand and say what a father says when his son breaks in front of strangers. 200 eyes on me. Jury box, press gallery, Brent, Cosima, Ruth, Agent Ramsey, Patricia Kendrick, Warren sitting 2 seats to my left, his hand on my shoulder. Judge Mercer's gavel hung in the air, frozen, waiting for order or chaos. David Calloway half rose from his chair, calculating, already planning his next objection. Brent's face, wet, broken, desperate, stared at me across 40 feet of federal courtroom. I thought about Silas, 4 years old, asleep on my chest last night, asking where his parents were, trusting me to have an answer. I thought about the DOT contract, $22 million, 5 years of payments, proof I'd never needed Brent's validation. I thought about the conservatorship papers, the forged medical statements, the Cedarwood intake call, Ruth's clinical voice requesting involuntary commitment. I thought about table 18, the champagne, the laughter, the old man's transfer, and I thought about what I'd told Silas when he said he was scared. I know, I am too. I stood up. Every head in the gallery turned. Judge Mercer's gavel froze midair. Brent's attorney half rose from his chair, and I answered him not as a victim, not as a witness, but as the one thing I'd never stopped being despite the conservatorship, the theft, the betrayal. A father. I didn't say what a father would say. I said what an engineer does when a structure fails. Inspection. No, I said. My voice carried across the courtroom, steady, measured. You didn't want to keep the firm alive. You wanted to bury your father alive to take his money. Those are two different things, and you knew the difference. Brent's mouth opened. No sound came out. I kept going. When you sign off on a bridge, you're telling the world that structure will hold. You're certifying it meets load requirements. You're putting your name on a promise that people will trust with their lives. In 43 years I signed off on 217 bridge inspections. People trusted those signatures with their lives. I never betrayed that trust, not once. Judge Mercer leaned forward, pen still. You signed a conservatorship petition, I said. You put your name on a document that said your father was incompetent, mentally unfit, a danger to himself. You certified that, and it was a lie. David Calloway stood. Your Honor. Sit down, Judge Mercer said quietly. Calloway sat. I looked at Brent. You asked if I was proud of you. I was. Delaware Bridge project, that was good work, solid engineering. But the conservatorship wasn't about saving your company. It was about taking mine. And when you sign your name to fraud, it doesn't matter how good the bridge is. The foundation's corrupt. Brent's face didn't collapse. It eroded the way concrete does. Under decades of water damage, slow enough you don't notice until the whole support gives out. I sat down. The courtroom was silent. No whispers, no shuffling, just 200 people holding their breath. Judge Mercer, let the silence sit for 11 seconds. I counted the way you count intervals between lightning and thunder to calculate how close the storm is. Then he nodded to Iris. Continue. The trial went on. More exhibits. More witnesses. Agent Ramsey testified about the sting operation timeline. Preston described the wired meetings, his voice shaking. Ruth's attorney entered a plea deal immunity in exchange for testimony about the Cedarwood call. Brent never looked at me again. Day 5, Patricia Kendrick took the stand. She wore a gray suit, hair pulled back tight, glasses reflecting the courtroom lights. Iris guided her through the preliminaries: name, occupation, how she knew the defendant. I don't know her as Cosima Valencia, Patricia said. When I met her, she called herself Cosima Aldridge. Cosima's head stayed down, staring at the defense table, hands folded. Tell the court what happened, Iris said. Patricia's hands gripped the witness stand railing. Her knuckles went white, the kind of grip you see on bridge workers. At height, holding on not from fear, but from knowing exactly what letting go costs. She called herself something different than Patricia said. Different last name, same pitch, guaranteed returns. Exclusive access to a private equity fund. She had documentation, references, a track record I could verify online. I invested $340,000. Gone in 6 months. Where did the money go? Iris asked. Shell accounts. Offshore. By the time I realized what happened, Cosima Aldridge had disappeared. No forwarding address, no contact information. The references were fake. The fund didn't exist. Did you report this to authorities? I tried, Patricia said. I spent 3 years hitting brick walls, statute of limitations questions, jurisdictional disputes, insufficient documentation. The fraud crossed state lines. The money crossed international borders. Every agency I contacted said it was someone else's jurisdiction. Iris paused. Why come forward now? Patricia looked directly at Cosima. I saw Mr. Garrison's case in the news. I realized I didn't have to stay silent anymore. What do you mean? For 3 years, I believed I was the only one, Patricia said. I thought it was my fault for trusting her. I thought no one would believe me because I had no proof she'd used that name. But when I saw what she'd done to Mr. Garrison, the conservatorship, the nursing home, the theft, I understood. She's a professional. She targets people. She plans it. And she counts on us staying quiet. Her voice hardened. I wanted her to know she couldn't delete me from the ledger. I'm not a line item she can erase. Cosima didn't look up. Iris entered Patricia's documentation into evidence, bank statements, emails, the fake fund prospectus. David Calloway cross-examined, trying to poke holes in the timeline. The name discrepancy, the jurisdiction issues. Patricia didn't waver. You invested $340,000 based on a sales pitch, Calloway asked. I invested based on references, documentation, and a track record I verified, Patricia said, all of which turned out to be fabricated. That's not a bad investment decision, that's fraud. Calloway had no response. Judge Mercer called a recess. The gallery stood. Patricia stepped down from the witness stand, walked down the center aisle, past the press section, past the FBI agents, past Ruth's row. She stopped at my row. 1 second, maybe 2. Her eyes met mine. A single nod. I nodded back. She'd carried that loss for 4 years. I'd carried the conservatorship for 3 weeks. Different weights, same physics. The nod wasn't forgiveness or closure. It was acknowledgement. We'd both refused to disappear. Patricia walked out. The courtroom started to refill. Bailiffs repositioned. Iris shuffled papers at the prosecution table. Brent stared at his hands. Cosima whispered something to her attorney. But in that half second when Patricia and I locked eyes, I understood something. She wasn't the only one watching this trial for permission to speak. There were others, and they were coming. They came. 3 more victims testified in the final week. A contractor from Florida who lost $412,000. A venture capitalist from Vermont who lost over $1 million. A retired teacher from Arizona who lost her entire pension fund. Cosima's defense attorney stopped cross-examining by day 7. Judge Mercer's robes were different for sentencing. Heavier fabric, deeper black, the kind of formality that announces permanence. The courtroom was full. Press in the back rows. Agent Ramsey and her team along the side wall. Warren sat beside me. Patricia Kendrick 3 rows back. Preston Madden near the exit looking like he wanted to disappear. Brent and Cosima sat at separate defense tables now. Different attorneys, different strategies. The prosecution had made it clear, co-defendants, but not equals. Judge Mercer adjusted his glasses. Read from prepared remarks. Brent William Garrison, he said. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Conspiracy to commit elder abuse, falsification of medical documents. The court recognizes mitigating factors, financial manipulation, by co-defendant limited prior criminal history cooperation with federal investigators. 12 years federal custody eligible for review after 8. Brent didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there, hands folded on the table. Judge Mercer turned to the other table. Cosima Maria Valencia. Wire fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy pattern, predation across multiple jurisdictions, spanning 8 years. The sentencing guidelines designate you as mastermind. This court concurs. 15 years federal custody, no early review. Cosima's head dropped. Her attorney whispered something. She didn't respond. Judge Mercer continued through the remaining defendants. The bank compliance officer who'd accepted the bribe, 2 years plus restitution. The document forger who'd created the fake medical assessments, 18 months. Then it was over. Brent turned in his chair, looked at me across 30 feet of courtroom. The distance between us now measured in years, not feet. No words, no gesture. Just a look that held everything we'd never said and never would. The bailiff stepped forward. Brent stood. Security took his arm. The door made the same sound closing behind him that our front door used to make when he left for college. A click. Final. Ruth left the courtroom before they led Cosima out. I saw her coat disappear through the back doors, same camel-colored wool she wore to our divorce hearing in 1994. Some people exit the same way every time. Warren drove me home. Neither of us spoke much. He asked if I wanted company. I said no. He squeezed my shoulder and left. I sat in my study. Silas was at preschool. Angela Frost had helped me enroll him in a program 3 blocks away. Good teachers, small class size. He'd be home at 3:30. I had 2 hours. The phone rang. Warren's number. Forgot something, I asked. No, he said. Just got a call from the FHWA. Thought you'd want to know. I waited. They ordered a P7 revision for the Delaware Bridge, Warren said. Your patent. The structural flaw, we reported, triggered a mandatory review. Secondary contractors are absorbing the cost Brent's firm can't cover. The bridge survives. I closed my eyes. Good. There's more, Warren said. The master ledger's been updated. Permanent record. Quote, Foundational Engineering Reference Patent, Member US 200378842, author, Luther Garrison. Your name's on his project now. Federal documentation can't be removed. I didn't speak. Couldn't. Luther, I'm here. You okay? Yeah, I said. Yeah, I am. I hung up. Sat there in the study staring at the phone. He'd wanted to bury my name. Instead, he'd carved it into the Delaware riverbed in reinforced concrete and federal documentation. Forever. The bridge would stand for 50 years, minimum standard infrastructure lifespan. Brent would be out in 12. The bridge would outlive his sentence. My name would outlive us both. I cried. 69 years old, 43 years in structural engineering, and I'd never wept over a bridge before, but this one had my son's fingerprints and my name, and I couldn't separate the pride from the grief. I cried for the company Brent had tried to build, for the father he'd needed and maybe never had, for the conservatorship papers he'd signed, for the nursing home intake form with my name on it, for Kazuma's calculated manipulation and his desperate belief that debt was the same thing as failure. I cried for Silas, who'd grow up visiting his father in a federal prison, trying to understand why Grandpa was the one tucking him in at night. I cried for the Delaware Bridge, which would carry traffic for half a century under a plaque that read, "My name, not his." And I cried because I didn't know if any of this was justice or just damage we'd all agreed to measure. The tears stopped eventually. They always do. I washed my face, made coffee, sat back down at the desk. The calendar showed December 18th. The Doty payments would start January 1st. Silas's custody hearing, permanent guardianship, was scheduled for January 9th. The foundation ceremony for the Fraud Victim Advocacy Fund was scheduled for late January, exact date pending venue confirmation. 7 weeks until I'd stand in front of cameras and donors and explain what forgiveness looks like when you're still calculating the damage. I looked out the window at the small yard. Same view I'd had for 20 years, same oak tree, same fence line, different world. Silas would be home in 90 minutes. I needed to pick up groceries. He'd requested macaroni and cheese for the third night in a row. And I'd learned that sometimes consistency matters more than nutrition. Brent had 12 years. Cosima had 15. Patricia had her voice back. The other victims had testimony on federal record. Warren had saved my life twice now, once with a transfusion, once with a wire. And I had a 4-year-old grandson who called me Papa and asked every night if the trains in his picture book were as strong as the bridges I used to build. Hung up phone. Looked over small yard. Didn't know what I was feeling in the best possible way. The foundation ceremony was 3 weeks away. Before that, I had to make sure I was legally allowed to raise the 4-year-old grandson I'd been caring for since October. The family court administration wing smelled like laminate and disinfectant, nothing like the wood-paneled federal courtroom where they'd sentenced my son 2 weeks earlier. Fluorescent lights, linoleum floors, plastic chairs bolted to the wall. Silas sat beside me, swinging his legs, clutching the stuffed giraffe. Angela Frost sat on his other side, clipboard on her lap, filling out final paperwork. Preston Madden stood near the water fountain, looking uncomfortable in a suit too expensive for family court. He'd shown up unannounced, said he wanted to be there for the ruling. I hadn't asked why. Judge Alina Voss called us in at 10 o'clock. Mid-50s gray hair pulled into a practical bun, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She specialized in custody cases involving incarcerated parents. Her courtroom had seen worse than us. We sat. Angela presented the updated social worker reports, Silas's preschool attendance records, my background check clean, except for being the victim in a federal fraud case. Financial documentation showing the DOT contract. Judge Voss reviewed everything in silence. Then she looked up. First matter, she said. The marriage between Brent William Garrison and Cosima Maria Valencia is hereby annulled. Grounds fraud, criminal concealment, material. Misrepresentation of identity and intent. The union is void ab initio from the beginning. Legally, it never existed. I blinked. Void from the beginning. Not divorced. Erased. This removes Ms. Valencia from the parental record entirely. Judge Voss continued. She has no legal standing regarding the minor child. No consent required. No custody claim possible. Angela scribbled notes. Silas played with the giraffe's legs. Second matter, Judge Voss said. Long-term custody of minor child Silas Garrison is hereby granted to paternal grandfather Luther Garrison for the duration of paternal incarceration. Structured contact between father and son. Monthly supervised video. Sessions letters permitted. In-person visits. Subject to federal facility regulations and child welfare assessment. She slid papers across the desk. Sign here, Mr. Garrison. I signed. My hand was steady. The court recognizes this is a 12-year commitment, Judge Voss said quietly. You'll be raising this child through adolescence. The financial records show you're prepared. Are you emotionally prepared? I looked at Silas. He was making the giraffe walk across the armrest. I don't know, I said, but I'm the one he has. Judge Voss nodded. That's the most honest answer I've heard in this courtroom all month. Custody granted. Next review in 6 months. We stood. Angela hugged me, brief, professional, but real. Preston approached as we walked out. Thank you, he said. I looked at him. For what? For trusting me 3 years ago when I opened the firm, Preston said. You referred me to municipal contracts when everyone else saw my youth as a liability. I wouldn't have had the courage to come forward to the FBI without that foundation. I'd invested in green timber because I knew it would bear weight eventually. Sometimes you see structural integrity before the load test proves it. You did the right thing, I said. Preston nodded and left. Angela took Silas to the vending machine in the hallway. I could hear him asking for gummy bears. I stood in the corridor holding the custody paperwork. 12 years. Silas would be 16 when Brent got out. I'd be 81, assuming structural integrity held, which at my age wasn't guaranteed. Kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school, first day of school photos, parent-teacher conferences, soccer games or piano recitals or whatever 4-year-olds grew into. The DOT money meant private school, college fund stability. I could do this financially. Emotionally, it was a different load calculation. Brent would miss it all. First lost tooth, first bike ride, first girlfriend, prom, driver's license, college applications. All of it happening through video calls and letters, filtered through prison security, and a grandfather who'd sent him there. Angela brought Silas back. His hands were sticky gummy bears. Ready to go home, I asked. Yeah, he said. We walked to the parking lot. December sun, cold air cars covered in frost. Silas held my hand. His palm was sticky with candy residue. 4 years old. He had no idea what any of this meant. Annulment, custody, duration of incarceration. To him, I was grandpa who made him macaroni and cheese and let him watch cartoons before bed. I buckled him into the car seat. Angela had taught me how 5-point harness chest clip at armpit level, straps tight enough. You could only fit 2 fingers underneath. Engineering principles applied to child safety. I got in the driver's seat, started the engine. The heater rattled, same sound it made the day I drove Brent home from the hospital in 1989, different car, but same frequency, like mechanical memory. Pulled onto the highway. Trees on both sides, bare branches against gray December sky. Traffic light, not heavy. Silas stared out the window, breath fogging the glass. Silent for 10 minutes. Then, Grandpa, can we get a dog? I looked in the rearview mirror. He was still watching the trees pass, completely serious. A dog, I said. Yeah, a big one. To play with. I smiled. First time in months. Real smile, not the polite expression I'd worn through depositions and testimony and sentencing. Actual joy breaking through. Maybe, I said. We'd have to research breeds. Make sure we have space. You'd have to help take care of it. I would, Silas said. I'd feed it every day. We'll think about it, I said. I went back to watching trees. I drove. Highway. Exit ramp. Residential streets. Home. Pulled into the driveway. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Email notification. Subject line, Garrison Foundation event. Final agenda, January 15, 2026. 3 weeks until I'd stand in front of Philadelphia's civic elite with a 4-year-old grandson and a convicted son and explain what justice built. 3 weeks. I had 3 weeks to turn $37 million into something that mattered more than money. The patent attorney's office was on the 43rd floor in Manhattan, high enough that I could see the East River bridges from the conference table, the structures I'd spent a career making safer. December light caught the cables. I counted the suspension points while the lawyers finalized paperwork. Thomas Quincy sat across from me. Department of Transportation senior representative, late 50s gray suit that had seen 1,000 contract signings, reading glasses perched on a nose that had probably reviewed 10,000 patents. He'd personally signed off on my sensor array application. Mr. Garrison, he said, sliding the final document across polished mahogany. On behalf of the Department of Transportation, $22 million structured payout. January 2026 through January 2031. Your sensor design will set the safety standard for a generation. I signed. The pen was heavy, expensive, the kind lawyers keep for moments like this. 18 federal bridges. Thomas continued. Your technology will monitor structural integrity in real time. The data alone will revolutionize how we approach infrastructure maintenance. Good, I said. He looked at me like he expected more. Celebration, gratitude, something. I just wanted to go home. Total liquidity, $37 million. 15 from the settlement that had nearly destroyed my family. 22 from 43 years of engineering nobody thought was worth patenting. Brent had been wrong about more than the law. The Amtrak back to Philadelphia crossed the same Delaware River bridge where my son's project was being revised with my patent. I watched the water through scratched train glass and felt nothing, which was its own kind of structural failure. The bridge stood. The train crossed. My name was in the Federal Ledger, and all I could think about was the 4-year-old who'd asked if we could get a dog. I called Warren from the train. "It's done," I said. 22 million confirmed. "Congratulations," Warren said. He sounded tired. "You earned it." "I want to allocate a portion of the patent revenue into something specific," I said. "Elder legal defense, forensic accounting resources. I need your logistics." Silence on the line. Train wheels on tracks filled the gap. "How much are we talking?" Warren asked. 3 million initial endowment. "Luther, I'm not asking permission," I said. "I'm asking for help setting it up right." Another pause. "Then I'll call Preston. We'll meet next week." We met in Preston's conference room the week before Christmas. Preston had coffee ready. Warren brought incorporation documents. Agent Celeste Ramsey showed up in a black SUV at 10 o'clock. I'd asked her to consult on FBI case referral protocols. Preston spread the papers across the table. "The Hale and Garrison Foundation," he said. "Incorporated tax-exempt 501c3. Mission statement: elder legal defense and forensic accounting resources for financial exploitation victims. $3 million initial endowment from your patent revenue." I looked at the name. Hale? Robust health. Protection. The state we're supposed to preserve. "Hale and Garrison," I repeated. "Thought you'd approve," Preston said. "It's not just your legacy. It's what you're fighting for." Celeste leaned forward. "The FBI has 43 open elder exploitation cases in the tri-state area alone. 43. The same number of years I'd spent preventing structural collapses. Unaware the real danger was happening in living rooms and bank lobbies. We can establish a formal referral pipeline," Celeste continued. "Victims who need legal representation, forensic accounting expert, witnesses. Your foundation could provide resources. The federal system can't. Not every case meets our jurisdiction thresholds. Yours can fill that gap." Warren set his coffee down. "Luther, are you certain 3 million is 8% of your total assets? You're raising a 4-year-old. This is permanent." I looked at him. "I spent 35 years building structures for strangers to cross safely. This is just another bridge." Preston pulled out the charter documents. Governance structure, board composition, disbursement protocols, grant application procedures, partnership frameworks with law schools, accounting firms, victim advocacy groups. "Initial cases will come from the FBI pipeline," Preston said. "But once word spreads, you'll get applications. A lot of them. People who've been fighting alone, same as you were before Warren helped." "Good," I said. Celeste signed the FBI partnership agreement. Warren signed as legal counsel. I signed as founder and primary endowment donor. Preston pulled out the official foundation seal, corporate stamp gold foil, the kind of bureaucratic theater that makes things real. "This'll be harder than any inspection you've ever run, Luther," he said quietly. "Every case will feel personal. Every victim will remind you of what you went through. You'll carry their stories the same way you carry bridge stress calculations." I met his eyes. "I've been doing hard things for 35 years. He stamped the charter. The Hale and Garrison Foundation existed. My name and the name of every elder who'd been erased from their own ledger. $3 million. FBI referral pipeline. Forensic accounting partnerships with firms who testified at Cosma's trial. Legal clinic partnerships with 3 law schools. Victim advocacy training programs. Pain converted to purpose. Theft converted to protection." Celeste left first back to federal cases that wouldn't wait. Warren stayed, helped me organize the paperwork into folders. Preston made copies for the IRS filing. "Public announcement is January 15th, Preston said. 2 weeks. You ready?" I thought about the foundation launch agenda in my email. Podium. Press. Donors. Civic leaders. Explaining to strangers what happened at table 18 in the FBI corridor in Judge Mercer's courtroom. "No," I said, "but I'll do it anyway." Preston nodded. "That's the only kind of ready that matters." I drove home. Silas was at preschool. Angela would pick him up at 3. I had 2 hours to sit in the study and stare at the foundation charter. My name, stamped in gold foil. Official. In 2 weeks, I'd stand in front of cameras and explain why Grandpa's name was going on something other than bridges. 2 weeks until I'd stand in front of cameras. First, I had to see the man who made it necessary. The visiting room glass was 3 inches thick. Industrial grade, the kind they use in underwater observation tanks. And my son sat on the other side, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 6 weeks. Christmas Day. Federal Correctional Institution, Pennsylvania. I'd driven alone. Left Silas with Warren and his wife for the afternoon. Told him Grandpa had an errand. He'd asked if I was coming back. I said yes. Brent's hair was cropped short. Olive jumpsuit. No wedding ring, they'd confiscated it when he arrived. He picked up the phone on his side. I picked up mine. Silence, 30 seconds, a minute. Your boy is at my house, I finally said. Eating well, doing homework. Preschool starts in January. Brent's eyes closed. Thank you, Dad. Not a favor for you, I said. He's my grandson. I'll come once a month. Not because I've forgiven you, but because a boy needs to know where his father is. Brent's hand pressed against the glass. I'm sorry. I know. I didn't. Doesn't matter, I said. You signed the papers. The rest is just explanation. He looked at me. Red eyes, hollow cheeks. The federal prison diet and the weight of 12 years settling into his bones. How is he? Brent asked. Really? Scared. Confused. Asks about you and his mother every night. I tell him you're dealing with legal matters. He's 4. He doesn't understand what that means. By the time he does, he'll be in middle school. Brent's head dropped. I'll bring pictures next time, I said. And I'll set up the video calls the judge approved, monthly, 30 minutes, supervised. Thank you. I hung up the phone, stood, walked out without looking back. The drive home took 90 minutes. I listened to the radio, stopped for gas, picked up Silas from Warren's house. He asked if my errand went okay. I said it was fine. 3 days later, Ruth called, asked if I wanted to come by for tea. Her house looked the same as it had when we were married, different furniture, same layout. She'd kept the place after the divorce bought me out in 1994. 31 years later, the kitchen still smelled like Earl Grey and lemon. We sat at the table. She poured. The tea service was the same blue and white porcelain from our marriage. She'd kept it in the divorce. I'd kept the engineering books, and somehow, 31 years later, we were both still using what we'd chosen. Are you all right, Luther? She asked. Truly, don't know if all right is the word, I said. But the foundations are holding. She smiled. Sad smile. The kind you give when you understand structural metaphors because you lived with an engineer for 15 years. I'm sorry, Ruth said, for the intake call, for not doing more to stop it. You testified, I said. You told the absolute truth before a federal judge. You did exactly what was required. Nothing more, nothing less. I should have called you, warned you. Would have changed nothing, I said. They had the conservatorship petition ready. The documents were signed. Warning me would have just moved the timeline. Ruth sipped her tea. Silas came by yesterday, asked if I had cookies. I gave him Oreos. He mentioned that, I said, 3 times. He's a good boy. I is? We sat in silence. Comfortable silence. The kind ex-spouses manage when enough years have passed and the anger's burned out. The foundation, Ruth said. January 15th. Yeah, I'll be there, she said. Front row. I looked at her. You don't have to? I know, Ruth said, but I'm going to. New Year's Eve, I put Silas to bed at 8:30. Came downstairs, turned on the television. Times Square, crowds, the ball waiting to drop. Warren called at 11:45. You watching? He asked. Yeah. Good year to close out, Warren said. Understatement. He laughed, tired laugh. Foundation update. 3 families have already reached out. Pre-launch. Words spreading through victim advocacy networks. 2 FBI case profiles are ready for review. Physical office opens mid-January. We're live before we're officially live. I sat up. 3 families. Elder financial exploitation. 1 conservatorship case like yours. 2 investment fraud schemes. All 3 need forensic accounting and legal defense they can't afford. We're already vetting them. Did we build this right, Warren? Silence on the line. Then you reported a structural flaw that could have saved your son's career. You gave patent money to strangers. You're raising a boy who needs a home. And you're asking if you built it right. The television showed the countdown to 9, 8. Yeah, I said. I am. Then the answer's yes, Warren said. You built it right. 7, 6, 5. Happy New Year, Warren, I said. Happy New Year, Luther. The ball dropped at midnight one year, ending another starting, and I realized I'd spent 2025 buried alive and resurrected, which meant 2026 had nowhere to go but forward. Fireworks on the screen, crowds cheering, confetti falling over Times Square. I shut off the TV, walked upstairs, checked on Silas, asleep. Stuffed giraffe clutched tight, breathing steady, safe. Walked back downstairs to the study. Opened the calendar, flipped from December to January. First page, January 1st, 2026. 2 weeks until the foundation launch. I knew exactly what to do. The hard part wasn't building the structure, it was standing at the podium and explaining why. I stood at the podium on January 15th and told them why. The ballroom was full. Donors, press, Philadelphia's civic leadership. I kept it short, explained Table 18, the conservatorship, the sting, the trial. Silas sat in the front row beside Warren, coloring quietly. I finished in 8 minutes. The applause was polite, professional. I didn't care about applause. The real opening happened 6 days later. The Hale and Garrison Foundation office opened on a Tuesday morning in January, with no reporters, no ribbon cutting, just fresh flowers on the intake desk and 6 people who'd stood in the storm. Warren unlocked the door at 9 o'clock. Modest brick storefront 2 blocks from Independence Hall. Preston had negotiated the lease. 3 rooms intake area, conference room record storage. Simple, functional, built to last. Ruth arrived first, carrying the flowers, white chrysanthemums. She set them on the desk. Why chrysanthemums? I asked. They mean truth and grief, both, Ruth said. Felt appropriate for a place built from betrayal's wreckage. Preston came next. Then Celeste, still in FBI field attire. Patricia Kendrick arrived last, standing in the doorway like she wasn't sure she belonged. Come in, I said. She stepped inside, looked around, touched the desk, the chair, the filing cabinet labeled Case Files Active. This is what I needed 4 years ago, Patricia said quietly. Not lawyers or courts, someone who understood what it feels like to be erased. Now you have it, I said. Silas tugged my sleeve. He'd been sitting at the intake desk, drawing on printer paper Preston had given him. Grandpa, look, he said. He held up the paper. A bridge, blue and gray crayon suspension cables, arcing overhead, 2 stick figures mid-span. That's beautiful, Bud, I said. Who's on the bridge? You and me, Grandpa, Silas said, pointing at the figures. Going somewhere. I folded the drawing carefully, placed it in my jacket pocket over my heart. Warren squeezed my shoulder. Preston opened a laptop case intake system already running. Celeste handed me a folder, 2 FBI referrals, both vetted, both waiting. The foundation was live. We stayed for an hour. Coffee, small talk. Ruth hugged Patricia. Celeste briefed Preston on case protocol. Warren showed me the bank account endowment, transferred operational funds ready. Then they left. Back to work, back to life. I stayed. 5 days later, the door opened at 2:30 in the afternoon. An elderly woman stepped inside, maybe 70, gray coat buttoned tight against January cold, clutching a binder, so thick her fingers shook. Red-rimmed eyes. The look of someone who'd been crying in parking lots. Can I help you? I asked. She stared at me. Mouth opened, closed, tried again. I was told this office could help, she said. My daughter and her husband, they've... She couldn't continue. I stood, pulled out the chair across from the desk. Please sit down, I said. I'm listening. She sat, set the binder on the desk. It hit with the same dull thud Cosima's conservatorship file had made. Same weight, same desperation, but this time I was on the other side. My name is Eleanor Michaels, she said. I'm 70 years old. My daughter has power of attorney. She's been... Her hands shook. I opened the binder. Bank statements, withdrawal records, forged signatures, property deeds, the documentation of erasure page by page. I see it, I said quietly, and I believe you. Eleanor started crying. I let her. Didn't rush. Didn't offer empty comfort. Just sat there while she wept, the way I'd wept in my study after the sentencing. Eventually, the tears stopped. What do I do? She whispered. We document everything, I said. Then we fight. She left 90 minutes later with an intake form, a case number, and an appointment scheduled for next week with Preston's legal team. I watched her walk to her car, shoulders straighter than when she'd arrived. The binder stayed on my desk. Tomorrow's work. Late January. Warren stood at the office window, looking east toward the Delaware River, construction cranes visible in the distance. The bridge? Brent's bridge. My bridge now. Pier P7's completely set, Warren said. Modifications verified. Spans on schedule. How long will it stand? I asked. With your corrections. Warren turned. 80 years minimum. 80 years. I'd be gone. Brent would be gone. Silas would be an old man. But the bridge would carry traffic across the Delaware River. My sensor array, monitoring every stress point my patent stamped into federal documentation. Brent didn't know. Sitting in federal prison, he had no idea his father's name was permanently carved into his greatest work. Maybe I'd tell him someday. Maybe I wouldn't. Warren's hand landed on my shoulder weight, without pressure, presence without demand, and I understood some gestures. Repeat not because we're trapped, but because we finally learned their meaning. You did good, Luther, Warren said. I looked at Eleanor's binder on the desk, at Patricia's thank you card pinned to the bulletin board, at Silas's crayon bridge taped to the wall, at the case files, 3 now, with 5 more pending review. I spent my whole life building bridges. I never knew the hardest one would be between father and son. Grandpa! Silas appeared in the doorway, backpack bouncing. Angela had picked him up from preschool. It's getting dark. Let's go home. I looked at Warren, at the Delaware Bridge framed in the window, at the foundation office that would open again tomorrow. Yeah, bud, I said, let's go home. And to you listening to my story, remember this father revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about building something that outlasts the betrayal. For 43 years, I built bridges over rivers, but I failed to build one between my son and me. I thought providing financial stability was enough. I thought professional success spoke louder than presence. Don't make my mistake. The strongest structure you'll ever engineer is the relationship with your children, and it requires more than blueprints and steel. It requires time you can never get back. When Brent signed those conservatorship papers, I had 2 choices: let bitterness consume me or transform the pain into purpose. The Hale and Garrison Foundation exists because I chose the latter. This wasn't father revenge in the traditional sense, it was father redemption. I believe God put me through this devastation so I could stand on the other side of that intake desk and say to someone like Eleanor Michaels, I see you, I believe you. You're not alone. That's the lesson. Pain that doesn't kill you can become the bridge someone else desperately needs to cross. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you faced family betrayal? How did you find your way forward? Please share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone fighting their own battle for dignity and justice. And if you'd like more stories like this, subscribe to Father's Vengeance. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you for staying until the very end. I don't take your time lightly. One final reminder, certain details in this story have been fictionalized to protect privacy and emphasize the lessons learned, but the core truth about elder exploitation, family betrayal, and the long road to justice remains real.